Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular San Rafael City council member meeting, council meeting. Okay, it was a 4-day weekend. What can I say? 3-day weekend. Can't even get that right. Tuesday, September 5th. I will request the city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Bushy is absent. Councilmember Hill.
Present.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Present.
Vice Mayor Eden-Scolati.
Present.
Mayor Kate.
Present. The 4 of us are here this evening. We met in closed session. I'll turn to the city attorney to see if there's any reportable action.
Good evening. There was no reportable action taken in closed session.
Thank you. So welcome. We're glad you're here, whether you're in person or zooming in and listening in virtually. Always want to appreciate staff. We have some new staff members in the room. Welcome for what you do every single day on behalf of our city. So for those who have recently attended a council meeting, you know that we'd like to start by highlighting important initiatives or events in our community. So tonight, I would like to bring to everyone's attention a Marin County campaign to reduce overdose deaths in the county. According to Dr. Matt Willis, he's our public health officer, every 5 to 6 days, a Marin County resident passes away due to an overdose. And the primary reason is, our primary driver of this is fentanyl. These overdoses occur in every city and every town in Marin for people across the age spectrum and from all walks of life. Recognizing that the scale of this crisis calls for a unified response, there are several organizations who come together to have an awareness campaign. Those organizations are OD Free Marin, the Marin Community Foundation, the Marin Independent Journal, and the County of Marin. They launched this campaign very recently, and it focuses on 3 priorities: raising awareness, increasing access to Narcan, that's a drug that can reduce an opioid overdose, and removing barriers to substance use treatment. You can learn more by going to the website www.odfreemarin.org. And you can just put in campaign awareness around fentanyl crisis Marin County. That will come up as well. And you can learn more and how you can make a difference in changing these statistics. And we just want to say to those organizations, thank you for coming together to address this scourge in our community and doing something about it. In addition, we like to include a land acknowledgement as part of the opening remarks. This acknowledgement has been provided by the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. But outside of reading this acknowledgement, the partnership continues behind the scenes and off of the dais with the tribe to take actions on the issues that are important to them. So we acknowledge that the present day city of San Rafael is traditionally home to the Coast Miwok people, many of whom today are tribal citizens of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria. We thank the original caretakers of this land and honor their continuing involvement and stewardship practices that benefit us all. With that, I will turn to the city clerk. City clerk will describe how people can participate in tonight's meeting. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. This meeting tonight is recorded and being streamed live to YouTube, and members of the public can provide comments by phone by calling 669-444-9171 and using the meeting ID 844-3204-9611# and pressing *9 to raise their hand for comment, or they can comment and watch directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda and use the raise hand feature through Zoom. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can email me at city.clerk@cityofsanrafael.org. Displayed on the podium and the projector is a 2-minute timer to help you stay within the 2-minute time frame. You're invited, though not required, to introduce yourself and say what part of San Rafael you live in, or if you're from outside of San Rafael. We are offering closed captioning for this evening's meeting on Zoom, and you can select the live transcript button on Zoom to enable this feature. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we start with open time for public expression. This is any item not on tonight's agenda. And I have received a card of someone in the room. So Kevin, now is your opportunity to come down and approach the council. Thank you.
I am Kevin, and I live in Bret Harte, where I've been a homeowner for 25 years. I'm here to express my displeasure at the continued proliferation of homeless structures on Anderson Drive and vicinity. The people in the camps all have phones, and they're calling their fellow scammers and social system abusers, and have put out the word that this is Easy Street, not Anderson Drive. These aren't locals that have fallen on hard times. They're people coming here because of the freebies. None of the homeless advocates I heard at the last meeting identified what San Rafael neighborhood they reside in. So I assume they actually don't live in San Rafael. One Zoom caller actually lectured the city council for bending to the wishes of the actual residents of San Rafael, shaming them that her own personal agenda wasn't being implemented. Advocates advance that homeless have rights. Sure, they have constitutional rights, but they absolutely do not have the right to move to San Rafael, build a non-permitted structure, grossly litter, pollute, and flaunt the community. They have absolutely no right whatsoever to do what they're doing. They're being protected by external advocates that keep repeating the same lie that they have the right to live here for free. They do not. The paid-for advocates for the homeless are trying to create a right to live wherever by shopping for judges and piecing together case law and injunctions. All this is doing is attracting more able-bodied scammers. San Rafael has a right to our own laws, to enforce them and not be confused with general Marin County. There seems to be some misunderstanding among homeless advocates that San Rafael isn't allowed to have its own city ordinances, for example, like Ross or Tiburon. I didn't see any homeless at the last meeting advancing their cause, even though there's a couple sitting right on the other side of that door, 20 feet away. I think the city is wasting resources on homeless that could be redirected towards people that are actually trying. The homeless show zero consideration for our community, so I see no reason why we should show them any. They need to be removed.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in the chambers? So open time for public expression, anything not on tonight's agenda. Not seeing anyone in the chambers. Is there anyone online?
I do see a few hands raised.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Ava Crisanti. I'd like to address the comments that were just made by Kevin. Kevin himself is a transplant to Marin County. I grew up in the county. I am not a paid advocate for unhoused people. In fact, I've spent an enormous amount of my own savings running PRAs and finding out what was happening. This is the first meeting that Kate Collin has attended since the death of Jimmy Sanders. Contrary to what Kevin has put forward, Jimmy Sanders was, as confirmed by the chief deputy coroner, a military veteran, and he was left out in the cold, in the rain, in the storms. He had a housing voucher that was unusable and it was allowed to expire. The Public Records Act requests that I ran indicated that it was Kate Collin, Mike McGuire, and Damon Connolly who put together that deadly camp under the freeway where this elderly, sick veteran was placed, and he got increasingly sicker until he died last July. So someone like Kevin, there's very little you can say to someone who is that hard-hearted to a veteran. And I suppose some of it has to do with his own racism because Jimmy was Black. Unfortunately, the city and the county itself, housed other people before they housed Jimmy, and those people were white, those people were healthier, those people were younger, and there should be an investigation of how that SSA was permitted to go on with no health inspection from the county. I've asked many times, and I will continue to ask. Jimmy deserved better, and Kevin should be ashamed of himself. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Amy Lykover. I live in Gerstle Park. I'd like to invite all of the public and the council members, I sent you an email earlier, to our September 14th meeting called Greening Our Future, a Tree Plan for San Rafael. This will take place September 14th, 7 p.m. in the council chambers that we now are looking at. So what does this mean? We're going to learn why trees are key to cooling Marin's intensifying urban heat islands and sequestering the greenhouse gases that drive climate change, how we can better nurture and care for them, help us shape city policy towards healthier trees in the ground and a greener canopy overhead. Councilmember Eli Hill will welcome us in the chambers. Bill Carney from Sustainable San Rafael will talk about where trees stand in the city's general plan. Nancy Hughes and Emily Spillett from California Urban Forest Council will talk about what's needed in a comprehensive tree master plan. Ray Moritz, Urban Forestry Associates, will talk about the first step. How do you have a complete tree inventory? Tanner Marr, who oversees the whole North Coast and the San Francisco Bay for CAL FIRE, will talk about potential resources. How do we fund this? How do we implement a tree master plan for all in the city? And Councilmember Micah Llorens-Gulati, whom we met with today, will talk about trees and equity. There will be ample time for questions and discussion, and this will be available via Zoom. One of the things I do is I oversee the Federation of San Rafael Neighborhoods and also what we call the San Rafael Tree Group. So if you go to the Federation website, you'll be able to see within less than a week our Zoom link, and we encourage you to attend in person. We're so excited about the greening of our tree city, and we thank you, council members, for spreading the word.
We're ready for you, Susan.
Hi. Yes, my name's Susan. I'm a resident of San Rafael. I bike and I walk to work and for recreation. And my comment is on the North San Rafael pavement maintenance project. It's a little hidden nugget there, but Las Galinas and Manuel Freitas are about to be repaved. And we're asking that the council request Public Works to assess narrowing the road and adding a buffer between the road and the bike lane instead of repaving as is and leaving the bike lane a minimum of 5 feet. It would increase safety significantly and have minimal impact on car traffic. A buffer between car traffic and bike lane is desperately needed. San Rafael has a major speeding epidemic. Today, I scrolled this SRPD's Instagram or Twitter, and every other tweet was about speeding. Constantly talking about people speeding and running intersections and people dying. And we desperately need a buffer and, more importantly, to narrow the lane to slow traffic so people stop getting hurt and so these senseless and costly accidents stop happening. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Matt Hartzell with WTB TAM, and I would like to echo Susan's comments in regards to the North San Rafael pavement plan. This is an opportunity to improve on the facility that's there right now, which is a 5-foot wide Class 2 bike lane. The travel lanes in both directions are 14 feet from the shoulder line to the bike lane. That's much wider than they need to be. In fact, lanes that wide encourage speeding. It's a proven scientific fact. So the city could be killing 2 birds with 1 stone and for very little money, take 3 feet from the 14-foot travel lane and make it a buffer striped with white paint. You no need to put bollards necessarily, just a paint job. It would be a very simple addition to this project. So we really urge the city council to direct the Public Works Department to make this change to the project designs before implementation. I will also point out that this is on the north-south bikeway route, which is the only continuous bicycle route right now between San Rafael, Terra Linda, and Novato in Marin County. So it should be a priority corridor. Thank you.
I see no other hands raised, but I'll give everyone a couple moments. I see no further public comment.
Thank you, and thank you all for your comments at the start of our meeting. We appreciate them. We will turn to the next item, which is city manager and council member reports. And we will start with the city manager. City Manager Lilovich.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and the community. I am happy to introduce you to Angela Robinson-Pignon, who's our new assistant city manager, joining her counterpart, John Stefanski. It's her first day today, so it's always good to start off with a council meeting day on your first day at work. We're really happy to have her here. She comes to us from the city of Oakland, and we're just really thrilled for her to join the team. A couple of things I wanted to mention about boards and commissions and committees. We still have applications open for our Police Advisory and Accountability Committee. Those close on September the 22nd. We all are also seeking community input on what that committee focuses on when it convenes. You can take that community survey. It's a 5-minute survey at cityofsanrafael.org/policing in San Rafael. We're also having another open house this week on Thursday, the 7th. There'll be an open house where you can come and ask staff questions about what that advisory committee is about. Councilmember Kurtz will be there. It's at the Terra Linda Community Center she'll be there, I think, from 12 to 3:30, and staff will be there until 6 o'clock in case folks want to come by. And it's a drop-in Q&A. You can do the survey. You can get support to fill out the application if you're interested. We also have a few other vacancies on our boards, committees, and commissions that are open right now. On our ADA Access Advisory Committee, we have 2 vacancies. There's 1 vacancy on the Design Review Board, 1 vacancy on the Fire Commission, 1 on the Voter Approved Tax Oversight Committee, 1 on the Pickleweed Advisory Committee, and then 2 vacancies also on the Park and Rec Commission and the Planning Commission. So these are really important volunteer opportunities. So I wanted to mention that and broadcast the opportunity to apply. The interviews will be with the City Council in October. So you've got October, correct, City Clerk? So you've got, a month to apply for these really great volunteer opportunities. And the website is cityofsanrafael.org/boards-commissions. Just a couple of other events coming up to mention. We do have another Movies in the Park this Friday night. It's Vivo. I don't know what that is, but I guess I'll have to go so I can watch it. It's at Peacock Gap, and those events are free. The movie actually starts 15 minutes after sunset. And this year at all the Movie in the Park events, city staff are attending around 5 o'clock and doing some fun games for the kids and snow cones and all kinds of goodies and snacks. And it's an opportunity to get to know your city staff and departments and what they do and engage civically at a really fun family event. We also have second Friday of every month, this Friday the 8th, being 2 great events downtown. One is Friday Night Art Walk from 5 to 8. And then we've got Dining Under the Lights that is from 6 to 10, which runs through October 13th. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. In addition, I'll turn to my colleagues to report out on meetings that they attended on behalf of the city. I'll start with the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the update. And as City Manager mentioned, I attended the Police Accountability Advisory Committee police open house in Pickleweed. And one thing I learned is that there's going to be a police academy coming up very soon. And I'm sure the information is on the website, but we really encourage our community members to join and really learn about, I think it's for you attend for 10 weeks. It's on Wednesday night, and you get to ride along one of the police cars, maybe even the boat, and really learn about how the police department works. So I think it's a great opportunity, and they need at least 20 people in order to make it happen. So just wanted to put that one out there. I also attended I went to San Rafael City Schools to recognize now former school board member Linda Jackson, who has served almost 18 years for our San Rafael City Schools. And so Councilmember Kurtz was there as well. So it was just great to be able to, recognize her service. And I just attended a couple of meetings, one around the Sea-Level Rise Subcommittee with Mayor Kate, and the other one tracking the progress on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan with Mayor Kate as well. So we look forward to attending the BPAC meetings in October. And one more event, let's see, I think City Manager has really mentioned the movie night in Pickleweed. That's going to be Mario Bros, I believe, for not this Friday, but the next one, or the September 22nd. And then on October 4th, MC is celebrating California Clean Air Day with a community festival at the San Rafael parking lot from 10 a.m. until noon. So and everybody's invited. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you. Just a couple updates. Attended a community session on 30 Joseph Court. This used to be a city-owned fire department. It is now part of the county. It was sold to the county, and the county is establishing a residential center for recovery. And so that program is going to be in partnership with Buccaloo and many other service providers. So our first meeting was really a community session just to meet with the neighbors and to share information. So it was a really nice time to be able to do that. Also toured 1250 South Alicio, which will be opening up in days, I believe. That will also be another shelter program, residential program for those who are homeless to be able to live and get supported services in the community. And that one is in Green Bay, and it was a Project Home Key project. Also did an MWPA. We had a field trip around San Anselmo. Bel Cole was there. San Anselmo, San Rafael Ridge, if everyone knows where all the eucalyptus trees are, and the work that will be underway there. It will be a multi-year project to mitigate that area, but it really shows the collaboration between MWPA and many, many other agencies within the community and the county. And that's it.
Thank you. And thank you for your leadership on Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Yes, thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one meeting to report. I was here in Chambers on Friday, August 25th for the Police Advisory and Accountability Committee open house. I was joined by Lieutenant Scott Eberly and Ivona Caceres. Caceres works for Civic Engagement Manager under the Digital Service and Open Government Department here in the city of San Rafael. We had several community members show up and express interest and participate in the boards that we had up to indicate priorities that the community is interested in around the PAC. So encouraging other community members to consider applying among the other boards and commissions that the city manager had shared. That's my report.
Thank you. And I just have two reports, both transit related. I'm the representative on SMART, Sonoma Marin Area Rapid Transit. August 2023 was the second highest ridership month in SMART's history. It was well over 16,000 weekly riders the past 3 weeks. There were nearly 3,000 riders last Wednesday. So I got this today. So that would have been the end of August at nearly 3,000. It was a new post-COVID Wednesday record, and the number of bikes continued to increase. Last week was a new record of 2,600. So SMART continues to trend in the right direction. In addition, I'm your representative on TAM, Transportation Authority of Marin. We had our August meeting canceled, but I'm delighted that I've been asked to be a part of the Marin County-wide Transportation Plan Ad Hoc Committee. And it's just what it sounds like. All the jurisdictions in Marin have their own transportation plans, their own funding that they go after. So how do we actually bring that all together? TAM does a lot of that, but how do we go even deeper in terms of bringing together resources and prioritizing projects? So that work just started, and it will be an 18-month process, and I'll continue to report out on it. So as always, thank you to my colleagues for what you do off the dais every week. We always want to hear from the public. So any comments from the public on either the city manager or council member reports, now's your opportunity. I'll look in the chamber. So yeah, come on down. You can just come down, and you're welcome to introduce yourself, what part of San Rafael you live in, but you don't have to if you don't want to identify yourself. So that's on the council member reports you just heard.
Yeah. Well, I think, did you get the green building?
Wait, come closer so I can hear you. Oh, so that greenhouse, if you don't mind, sir, if you could wait, that's agenda item. It's gonna be agenda item 6. So we have some proclamations. So if you want to hold your comments till then? Okay. So any comment on the reports that were just given? Not seeing anyone in the room. Is there anyone online who'd like to comment on the reports?
I do see a hand raised.
Thanks, Ava Crisanti. I just wanted to point out something that was left out of comments about OD-free Marin. The count for overdose deaths in the county was inflated, and that was only something I was able to ascertain by running a CPRA because the county wasn't making its information available. The AOD board and OD Free Marin have been counting overdose deaths that occur outside of the county, and I've written about that and their processes, their methodology. After a lengthy discussion with Dr. Willis and his epidemiology team. That article is available for free at marincountyconfidential.substack.com. There's a lot of money that's going to be coming down the pipeline for recovery / everything else related to overdoses, but there's a lot of information that's being left out. I would point out that it is concerning that not only is the IJ partnering with OD Free Marin, which is an unincorporated coalition, an offshoot of the county and Dr. Willis's department, but there's a $40,000 ad buy for media that includes money for the Pacific Sun. So both of these publications, which should have a healthier tension with local government, are now partnering and even profiting from some of the opioid settlement money that is going to constrain their ability to properly criticize and investigate things that the county and its municipalities are engaged in, especially with regard to all the monies being spent and funneling into these nonprofits related to over.
I see no other hands raised, but I'll give everyone a moment. I see no further public
Thank you.
comment.
I'll close the public comment on that item and we'll turn to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be held to the consent agenda? Not seeing any. I will open the public comment on this item. We did receive public comment during open time for public expression. You are more than welcome to comment again. We have received obviously your comments at the beginning of the meeting, but I will look to the chambers. This is on the consent agenda, which has two items, the approval of the minutes and a pavement maintenance contract. Not seeing anyone in the chambers. Anyone online like to comment on the consent agenda?
I see no hands raised, so I'll give everyone a moment. I do see a hand.
Hello, my name is David Seltzer. I'm a San Rafael resident on Lincoln Avenue here. And I just wanted to add my voice to the other commenters earlier in the open comment section, which is just that taking advantage of this repaving of Las Gallinas to add a bicycle buffer to reduce the traffic lane and add a bicycle buffer for that class 2 bicycle lane that's currently there. And also to expand on that as well, that when it comes to these repaving efforts, that if that can be something that's run past BPAC, or just that there's always a lens of how to improve infrastructure for cycling purposes as part of these repaving efforts, so that just when there's the natural maintenance of our roadways and of our infrastructure, that when it's time to repave or restripe, that we have some kind of mechanism to look for those opportunities to improve the cycling infrastructure of San Rafael. I think that would be a huge benefit at a very low cost, in the sense that the restriping already has to happen or the repaving already has to happen. And so if we can look for those opportunities to improve the network at those times, that would just be, it's low-hanging fruit, really a great potential benefit to the community, to the city. So yeah, thank you for your time. Just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
I see no other comments. I'll give everyone a moment. I see no further public comment.
Thank you. I'll close the public comment and just wanted to respond to the BPAC comment. I think that's a great suggestion. Our next BPAC meeting is on October 4th. Yes. October 4th, and it is open to the public. And we really encourage you to continue to provide input in those moments. With that, if there are a motion on the consent agenda, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Eden Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Before we get to our agenda items, we have 3 special presentations. We do accept public comment on these items prior to giving the proclamations. The 3 proclamations are National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, and National Preparedness Month. So I will open up the public comment prior to the presentations. If anyone would like to comment on those items, I'm looking in the chambers. Not seeing anyone in the room. Is there anyone online who would like to comment on any of the 3 special presentations that are about to follow?
I do see a hand raised.
Thank you. I wanted to comment on what I believe is the Hispanic heritage item. Is that correct?
Yes, you can comment on any of the presentations.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that we have seen something very unusual in the county and in San Rafael recently. I do want to point out that the SSA that I begged the city of San Rafael to get a health inspection for, that was a majority Black and Latino police-run camp. And the conditions in that camp were absolutely horrific. They were so bad that they sent Jimmy Sanders into a cardiac ICU, and he died a year after that ICU experience. And 2 years, approximately 2 years after he was sent into that camp, he had to live through 2 different winters. But, you know, the fact that the worst conditions of any city-run camp were reserved for a majority Black and Latino camp, mostly elderly, and all were medically vulnerable in that camp. It just beggars the imagination. So while, you know, you do this Hispanic heritage thing, I think it's important to take a look at how you're actually treating, you know, people of Hispanic heritage in the city of San Rafael. I'd like to point out that what we saw last week with a kind of demand for the ALPRs and the return to broken windows policing that you saw from Canal Alliance offshoot Voces de la Canal was troubling, because we know that both of those things increase pressures on minority communities. They're used to target and find those communities. So that needs to be addressed instead of just glossed over. Thank you.
I see no other hands raised. I'll give everyone a moment. I see no further public comment.
Thank you. I'll close the public comment and get to the presentations. So the first one is a proclamation supporting National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I will read a portion of the proclamation, and then I will invite Tara Connors, who is the Behavioral Health RS. I'm not sure what BRS. Well, you can tell us what the acronym is, Prevention Outreach Team, to respond. So whereas the month of September is recognized as National Suicide Prevention Month, whereas suicide is a national and statewide public health problem, and suicidal thoughts can affect anyone regardless of age, race, gender, orientation, financial situation, religion and background, or any other factors. And whereas suicide remains a leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause of death among individuals between the ages of 10 to 34. And whereas the National Alliance on Mental Illness and the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, just dial 988, works to help individuals in crisis and provide resources. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of the City of San Rafael proclaim the month of September 2023 as Suicide Prevention Month in the City of San Rafael. And I am delighted that Kara Connors is here to accept this proclamation, and we'd love it if you'd say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you, council members and Mayor Kate, for having me today as we mark a very important month in raising awareness for suicide prevention. But before I begin, I'd like to share a few caring reminders which often guide our work at each of our meetings for the Marin County Suicide Prevention Collaborative. Suicide can be an emotional and painful topic to discuss, and many of us are loss survivors who miss our loved ones, our friends, our colleagues, our classmates, and our neighbors. Some of us may have attempted suicide or are thinking about suicide, and if that is you, please reach out and one number is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And lastly, please do not hold yourself responsible for what you didn't do or say in the past based on what you learned today. Suicide is a complex health issue. In Marin County, our community has felt the pain and devastation of suicide loss. From 2017 to 2022, 224 Marin residents have died by suicide. Suicide in our community occurs across the lifespan, race, ethnicity, and gender. However, while men make up 50% of Marin's population, they represent over 70% of those deaths by suicide, which follows national trends. Youth, young adults, and those ages middle age and over 65 are disproportionately impacted. Research indicates that up to 150 people are impacted by one loss. This would mean that last year, 5,000 people in our community experienced sudden grief and profound loss. But the other part of the data narrative is one communicated by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which conducted a survey reporting that most people feel that suicide can be prevented. They're interested in learning how to play a role in helping, believe people show signs before taking their life, but relatively few feel they can identify those signs or have the right words to have a conversation, but would like to. And the great thing is now in our community, we are starting to see a greater readiness for talking about these issues and other struggles. The Marin County Suicide Prevention Collaborative just finished 3 years of collective and community action focusing on prevention, intervention, and postvention strategies across individual, family, community, and institutional levels. During this period, we have expanded our reach to populations disproportionately impacted by suicide. We've held over 120 suicide prevention events and trainings, developed partnerships with the Gun Safety Collaborative, the School Wellness Collaborative, OD Free Marin, and many others. And we've conducted several campaigns, just to name a few. We know there is not one reason for why someone might take their life. When we work across sectors and agencies, we begin to see that there are shared risk and protective factors of mental health, suicidality, substance use, and other behavioral health issues that we have a better chance of addressing through collaborative action. If we treat suicide as a health issue, then we know what our next steps are: to ask, listen, and connect. This month and throughout the year, we are promoting the Ask, Listen, and Connect campaign. We know that talking directly with someone will not cause someone to take their life. In fact, by not talking about suicide, we can keep somebody at risk. So if you notice words or actions or feelings that are different than what you might normally see in someone you know, you can ask directly, are you feeling hopeless? Sometimes when people feel hopeless, they might be thinking about suicide. Is that true for you? And then listen. Listening is a great door opener. Resist the temptation to interrupt. And then connect. I can see why you are in so much pain. Let's get you help and keep you safe. You do not have to be an expert or a therapist to ask, listen, and connect. You can provide a connection to help and to hope. So what's next this month? We have over 15 different events that are taking place in our community. And tomorrow from 5 to 6:30, we're going to kick off Suicide Prevention Month at 3240 Kerner Boulevard, which is our next collaborative meeting. It'll be our first in-person meeting after post-COVID. I've also left a packet of materials at the door. For more information, please contact prevention.marinbhrs.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kara, for those beautiful comments. We appreciate you and the work that you and your team are doing. We have, as I said, 3 proclamations. The second one is Hispanic Heritage Month, and I didn't know it. Okay. Cecilia Zamora is able to receive it virtually. Hi, Cecilia. I'll just mention part of the proclamation. Thank you for being here in this hybrid format. So the city of San Rafael recognizes the contributions, diverse cultures, and extensive histories of the American Hispanic and Latino communities, whose ancestors come from Spain, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central and South America. And whereas over 30% of the population of San Rafael is Hispanic, Latino, or indigenous descent, who contribute to the economic, cultural, social, and historic fabric of our cities. And whereas many City of San Rafael employees have Hispanic and or Latino heritage, and they contribute to the strength and diversity of our overall city workforce. And whereas it is important to increase cultural awareness and diversity by paying tribute to the valuable contributions made by Hispanic and Latino Americans to our business, cultural, and educational communities. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and City Council of the City of San Rafael proclaim September 15th through October 15th as Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm delighted that we can welcome Cecilia Zamora of the Latino Council to accept this proclamation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. Can you hear me okay?
I can, but speak up just a little bit. It's a big room.
Okay, I will try. I'm so sorry I cannot be there in person. I'm actually in quarantine because of COVID, but I'm so happy to be here virtually. So thank you so much. Just to let your audience know that my introduction as Cecilia Zamora is as president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Marin and also executive director of the Latino Council. I'm so proud to be here to accept this resolution. I want to thank Mayor Kate and the City of San Rafael Council for recognizing National Hispanic Heritage Month in the city and also for acknowledging your growing diverse workforce at the city, which I totally have seen grow and be nurtured and supported. I also want to thank the mayor and city manager, Christine Alilovich, for their invitation to accept this resolution. There are many wonderful organizations now working with the Hispanic Latino community in San Rafael and in Marin County. And over the years since I've been doing this work, over a couple of decades, we've seen that improve. And so it's very nice to be recognized in your resolution, but also to remind the audience and the residents who are listening that there are many organizations and community organizations and government agencies that are doing a great job. I wanted to say that these resolutions are important as they solidify the commitment to communities that often feel invisible and address issues that are not always dealt with. So some may think, well, a resolution is a resolution, but they really are where policy begins and commitment begins. And so we totally appreciate that. For the Hispanic Chamber, I wanted to say that we are honored to begin work this year and in the future year with the City of San Rafael on disaster preparedness for employers and employees, which includes a bilingual and multicultural approach. We continue to support the growing Latino business sector in San Rafael and are working with the Dominican University Borowski School of Business to track the economic impact of that sector for San Rafael and Marin County. We are also, along with the Latino Council, monitoring the diverse representation on boards and commissions and hope to have some good reporting to the City Council in 2024 as we continue to gather this data. And I know that you mentioned some openings that you're looking at, so we hope to be able to help your staff to increase the diversity representation on those boards and commissions. Lastly, I want to thank Mayor Kate again for adding this National Hispanic Heritage Month resolution to your agenda, which really is a significant recognition of the contributions of the Hispanic Latino community in San Rafael, Marin, and in the Bay Area, as well as it being a national recognition. So we thank you very much. A special shout out to Councilmember Micah Giulotti for her continued support and representation of the Latino community in Marin. And we thank you so much and appreciate the time to be able to accept this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Those were fantastic comments. I'm sorry you weren't here in person, but thank you for keeping yourself and everybody else safe. So thank you. And we have a final one, which really segues nicely about proclamation supporting National Preparedness Month, which Cecilia had actually talked about, disaster preparedness. I will read part of the proclamation, and then Manny Albano from the fire department will come down and say a few comments. So whereas in San Rafael, our community is susceptible to human-caused and natural disasters, including earthquakes, fires, floods, pandemics, and other large-scale emergencies that we cannot predict. And whereas when large-scale emergencies occur, professional first responders and disaster workers will be overwhelmed, and they will need the support of prepared and trained residents. And whereas government agencies and disaster organizations cannot bear the sole responsibility, so whereas working in partnership with community members such as the Community Emergency Response Teams, CERT, neighborhood response groups, NRGs, and community organizations will minimize the loss of lives and injuries. Whereas San Rafael is an age-friendly city. So this year we are committed to being inclusive and accessible. San Rafael will join the nation in emphasizing this year's themes, preparing for older adults. Now, therefore, I, Kate Collin, Mayor, and the City Council do hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as National Preparedness Month. And I know Manny will inspire us to even do more. Welcome, and we look forward to your comments.
Thank you, City Council and Mayor Kate. So as you said, September is National Preparedness Month. The theme this year is Prepared Seniors. So San Rafael Fire Department will be out all month at multiple events. We're very excited to be heading to events like the Senior Fair, the San Rafael Chamber of Commerce event, Porch Fest, movie night, and multiple community presentations about preparedness and many more. When the fire department kind of works towards preparing a community and preparing its citizens for disaster, we look at things like how to prepare for disaster and evacuations. Research has taught us three things. Evacuations come down to three attributes: the failure or delay to alert the public, the failure to mobilize quickly once alerted, and extreme fire weather. We've seen these factors play out multiple times in California, whether it's the Paradise Complex, the Glass Fire, the Thomas Fire, and most recently we saw it play out about a month ago with the Lahaina situation. Our goal as the fire department is to basically show up. We want to support our community. We want to protect our community. We also want to empower our community members. And one of the best ways we can empower our community members is to have them get involved, to reach out to us, to do things like sign up for alerts, sign up for Alert Marine and Nixle, make a plan. Make a plan with your family, make a plan with your loved ones, make a plan with your friends, and know where you're going to head, what you're going to do during a disaster. We also reach out and advise people prepare go bags and emergency supplies. This way, we kind of add that additional comfort when disaster strikes. And of course, feel free to reach out to the fire department with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and everything that you and all of our first responders do every single day to keep our community safe and inviting us to do our part as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I always find those such great moments to reflect on the incredible work that's going on in our community and taking a moment to recognize the different community groups and organizations with whom we work. So thank you all for participating. We are ready to get to the next part of our agenda, which is the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Report and Climate Action Priorities Update. I see Corey Bidoff has joined us, and I think he will get us going on this item. And Christina Rourke is here as well. Welcome.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you. Let's see. Okay. Oh, good. Yes. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Well, nice to see you, and it's nice to not be at 10:30 at night too. Next to me is Christine O'Rourke, who I think you've all met before. She's our fabulous sustainability coordinator through the Marin Climate Energy Partnership. We're going to give you an update on the greenhouse gas inventory and our sustainability priorities. And I will get technically acclimated here. So I'm going to start off with a brief state of the climate. I won't go into that very much detail, then kick it over to Christine, who'll go over the 2021 greenhouse gas inventory. And then we're going to stop and just take some questions because there's a lot of information. And then we'll talk about the 2-year sustainability program work plan, including the last 2-year updates. And then we'll stop for discussion at the end. So just to set the context, I know I had some stuff in the staff report and we don't really need to go into it in great detail. We all read the news and see all the disasters and other things that have been happening. One of the things that I wanted to point out is just the ocean heat content reached a new high in 2022. We continue to set records, and 90% of the Earth's heat gets trapped in the ocean, which continues to affect us through sea level rise and the melting of glaciers and things like that. And then sea level rise impacts us dramatically as well here in San Rafael as the oceans expand. In the past 20 years, sea level rise has doubled. And then we've seen more extreme heat days and increases in land temperature as well, and high drought years in places around the country. And over 28 countries had their highest temperatures in history. And so the impacts to that are not only things like severe floods and droughts and wildfires and all that, but then when you look at California, you see California and Florida are losing insurers, then our sort of backstop for some of these things kind of go away as well. And we have cascading impacts throughout the community. So in 2008, we had our first climate action plan, and in 2017, we had a 17-member Green Ribbon Committee led by Mayor Kate and I that developed the newest climate action plan that you all adopted in 2019. It has a 40% reduction goal by 2030, and it's got an asterisk because we've moved the goalposts a bit, or the state has. We're targeting our 25% reductions to a 2005 baseline, and then they updated that to 1990 levels, which is significantly less. So we're trying to get a 40% reduction goal based on those 1990 levels. And I like to ask people if you've ever reduced anything in your life 40%. So we have 54 measures in there. We promised regular council updates, and we also promised to elevate an equity and economic lens to all of our programs as well, to be able to reduce unintended consequences for people and businesses, and to look for co-benefits whenever possible. So the plan's got all your basic stuff: renewable energy, transportation, waste, water. Sequestration and adaptation is about drawing carbon back down into the earth and preparing for climate since it's happening now. And then we promise community engagement and to implement and monitor. One of the changes that's happened in the past few years is we met our 25% reduction goal by 2020, and a lot of that was due to state actions and regional efforts like MCE, clean energy. And what's really happened as we get toward this new reduction target is that it's really flipped. More and more is going to have to come from us at our local level. So we're going to have to be bolder. We're going to have to do more things and figure out new ways to fund and make things happen. And also, low-hanging fruit's been picked, so it's harder to find those opportunities as well. So our challenge is it's a local mandate, but it's global influences. This is the general greenhouse gas reduction pie chart, or greenhouse gas emission pie chart. When you think about community emissions and you think about San Rafael's real nexus of control, we only produce 1% of our greenhouse gas emissions community-wide. So we've got a lot to do to get that 40%, but we only have direct control over a small piece of it. So that's the context. Now we get to kick it to Christine, and she'll give you our greenhouse gas inventory.
Thank you very much, Corey, and good evening, Mayor Kate and members of the council. As Corey said, I'm Christine O'Rourke, and I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. And tonight we're talking about the 2021 Greenhouse Gas Inventory Report. This is for community-wide emissions, and it's for 2021 because that's the latest year that we have all the data that we need in order to produce these reports. This report is provided and funded by the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, of which San Rafael is a member. We're a partnership of all of the Marin jurisdictions, plus some of our special districts like Marin Clean Energy, TAM, and the Marin Municipal Water District. And we work together to implement our climate action plan programs. The annual community greenhouse gas inventories are one of our work products. We also do municipal inventories approximately every 5 years. The latest one has been delayed due to the impact of the COVID pandemic. We've been waiting for operations to kind of return to normal before doing a municipal inventory. It's important to realize that these inventories are what we call activity-based, and those are mean that we're calculating emissions that come from activities that are performed by San Rafael residents and businesses, and that's in comparison to a consumption-based inventory. Consumption-based, we're looking at actually emissions that are produced upstream from mining, growing, producing, packaging, shipping, food, products from other places outside of San Rafael to the San Rafael residents and businesses. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District did do a consumption-based inventory for all of the jurisdictions in the Bay Area. That was back in 2015, and they were utilizing 2013 data. So this is a little bit old. They haven't updated that consumption-based inventory, but it's showing you here on the slide that 44 metric tons were produced per household. When you look at it through a consumption-based lens, that's in comparison to our activity base, which we're calculating, and that's at 14 metric tons for 2021. So essentially, we're capturing about 30% of the emissions, but we are focusing our efforts on our inventory on those activities that we can reliably quantify and that we can track progress over time in order to measure whether we're meeting our goals or not. And there are also the activities that we have and the city has the most influence over. So this is a look at emissions by sector in 2021. The largest emissions come from the transportation sector. That's 2/3 of emissions. So that's passenger vehicles as well as commercial vehicles, and a small percentage of that would be public transit. The next largest section of this pie is the consumption of natural gas in the built environment. That's both residential and commercial buildings. The electricity sector is much smaller at 6%. It used to be much larger, but as I'll talk about, it's really shrunk over time. And then we have these three smaller sectors, waste, wastewater, and off-road, actually 4 of them, and water, that are between 1% and 3%. And I'm going to talk a little bit about almost all of these sectors in just a couple of slides. So this is a look at emissions since 2005 we've been actually calculating emissions, and we calculate what the emissions or estimate what emissions were in 1990 according to California guidance, and that is to assume that emissions were about 15% below the 2005 level. So since 1990, emissions are actually down 21%, and the city's goal is to have emissions 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030. So we're about halfway to that goal. And as Corey mentioned, the city did adopt a climate emergency resolution, which is to have net zero emissions by 2045. That's the same as the state. The state is assuming that about 85% of emissions will be reduced, and then the last 15% will either be sequestered naturally or will be achieved through carbon capture technologies. So in the built environment sector, we see that purchased electricity use is down 22% since 2005 due to a couple of factors. One is just solar PV installation, which continues to grow. And then the other factor is energy efficiency and conservation. So the energy consumption is shown here by the blue bars, and the emissions are shown by that red line. So emissions have gone down quite a bit more. They're actually down 83% since 2005, and that's due to the lower carbon intensity of electricity. So in 2021, PG&E was actually 91%. Their electricity was 91% greenhouse gas free, and MCE was 98% greenhouse gas free. So that makes a very big impact. And here, because our electricity really is so clean, we really see an opportunity to convert both our vehicles and all of the natural gas appliances and heating systems to ones that use electricity, because it would end up in a quite significant reductions in emissions. When we look at natural gas use is down 13% since 2005. Emissions go along with consumption. They follow right along. The annual change, a lot of that is due to variability in weather. So when we have a cold year, of course, we're using more natural gas to heat, particularly our homes. Some of the decline can be due also to energy efficiency and conservation. And here we really do see an opportunity to continue to convert buildings and natural gas appliances to ones that use electricity. That's how we're going to really drive emissions down from natural gas use. In the waste sector, which is about 3% of community emissions, waste itself, again, in the blue bars, so waste disposal has decreased 19% since 2005, and emissions are even lower. They're down 45%. And that's because we are beginning and doing a fairly decent job of sorting our organic waste and taking organic waste out of the landfill, where when it decomposes, it produces methane, some of that which escapes into the atmosphere. So we've taken organic waste both out of the landfill and out of our alternative daily cover. In the water sector, per capita water use has declined 29% since 2005. Emissions are way down. They're down about 95%. And that's because both of the water agencies, Marin Water as well as Sonoma County Water Agency, which provides about 20% of the water to Marin Water, both of those agencies use 100% renewable energy in their operations. And then in the wastewater sector, emissions are actually increase in this sector. They've increased 14%, and that's because it goes along with the population growth in San Rafael since 2005. The energy that's actually used to process wastewater, both electricity and natural gas, is embedded in the waste in the built environment sector. So we don't actually tease that out. The emissions here that are reported are just from the actual decomposition of the waste and the treatment and during the treatment process. Central Marin uses their biogas that's produced to actually to power their own plant. Usually meets about 100% of their facilities needs. And then when they have excess that's exported to the grid, it's purchased by Marin Clean Energy, and it helps to green the electricity for all of the Marin residents. And then finally, I kind of saved the biggest sector for last because we'll be talking a lot about transportation in the rest of the presentation. Vehicle miles traveled are only down about 2% since 2005. Transportation emissions are down 21%. So there's 2% is due to VMT decline, but the rest of it is due both to improvements in fuel efficiency. So our cars that we're driving, the gas cars, are more fuel efficient. And then we also are using more alternatively fueled cars. That's really zero emission vehicles like electric vehicles. And those were about 8% of the vehicles that are on the road in Marin are registered in Marin are electric vehicles. So those are helping to drive down emissions in this sector. But we really do still have a long way to go and a big opportunity here to reduce emissions, both through the adoption of electric vehicles, as well as using alternative transportation modes like clean transit, walking and bicycling, etc. So with that, I think we're going to pause and answer any questions that you might have on the greenhouse gas inventory or on what Corey presented earlier.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with questions, Vice Mayor.
I just observed, thank you so much for the report. This is really great to see. I was surprised that I will think that in 2020 with the pandemic, there will be like a much bigger reduction, but it doesn't seem like a lot. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's true, the reduction, like when you look at electricity consumption, there really wasn't a big, or natural gas, there wasn't a big reduction that you may have expected because a lot of the businesses were closed. But I think on the flip side, there were a lot of people staying home during the day and using their homes when they may have been cutting back on electricity and natural gas. So I think those two things kind of evened out. When you're looking at the transportation emissions, that data is based on modeling that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission produces. And so they look at years 2015 and then they look out to 2025. So they're not actually, they are basing on that on real-time data and looking at transportation as you know, how people move from one place to another, but they're not really recording transportation or trips that are made in any given year. So that's why you're not really seeing a big drop due to the pandemic in the transportation sector.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was actually looking at transportation. Yeah, so thank you. That explains. Thank you.
Good question. Councilmember Kurtz, any questions?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the report, and thank you for some oodles of questions. So I appreciate you getting back to me on those. Can you just go over again the built environment? The area that I was looking at was the checklist. You had mentioned the compliance checklist, and we had a little bit of back and forth on that. I really appreciate the approach of being proactive versus reactive. And I'm wondering if there's additional work within that checklist that can help, because I'm looking at the two main areas, transportation and then built environment are major areas that we need to focus on. And if the checklist is as a tool that we would think would be effective to help in that area.
Sure, I'll start and then see if Christine wants to add to it. We need to update the checklist at this point with our new green building policies and some of the other things that have been adopted. And we're also trying to work with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District to understand how useful it is at this point compared to the way it was in the past. There is I'll just say it's without a great detail. It applies to sort of medium-sized projects, so single-family homes. It doesn't usually apply to. It doesn't apply to really big projects where you get a lot of big bang for the buck. It applies to this sort of subset, and there's these thresholds that you have to look at to see what it applies to or not. And there's also there are a lot of new policies that are in place specifically related to green building that are attacking a lot of those emissions as well as some other requirements from the state. So what we're trying to understand at this point is how valuable is that checklist still, and how do we use it in a way that really does change things? So we need to get back to you on that one, because we need to talk to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and try to understand what that is and where it's really useful at this point. So that's where I sit right now, and I don't know as much as Christine does. I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
Sure. I'm not very familiar with the checklist that San Rafael uses, but I will say that the Air Quality District does provide guidance to like communities that don't use a checklist. And as long as, and this is to meet both 2030 goals and then longer term to be on a trajectory to meet 2045 goals for zero net energy or zero net emissions. So the Air District is recommending that you require new construction to be all electric, and that you also have electric vehicle charging requirements that are above what the state base code would be. So as long as those two things are either applied to new construction, and I know the city has adopted a REACH code ordinance that would qualify for that. So if the city is applying that ordinance, I think that may mean that the compliance checklist is not as critical.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was wondering. Yeah, that's exactly like what else would we need to put on that checklist, which might go back to conversations more around ordinances. The Central Marin, I was curious about the Central Marin biogas that you'd mentioned. Is that managed? And that's not a city managed thing, right? That's bigger than the cities. Can you speak to a little bit how that's actually addressed?
That's right. So when we calculate the emissions that come from wastewater, we're actually just taking a percentage of that based on the city's population. So yes, that facility also serves other jurisdictions outside of San Rafael, but we're only accounting for that percentage that is responsible by San Rafael residents and businesses.
Okay. I definitely will have other questions or comments, but I think that's it for right now. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Corey, for being here tonight and delivering your report. I had a few questions. You mentioned that we're relying on models. Could you characterize the strength and weakness of the models that we're using? You had mentioned the Metropolitan Transportation Commission is what provides us the data, but maybe you can characterize a little further. where do these models fall short?
So the only, I would say that the only real model that we're using is for transportation. So for electricity and natural gas, we get actual data from PG&E and from MCE. Also the water, the wastewater. The off-road is produced by, that is pretty much a model that's produced by the California Energy Commission. The waste is actual data. So some of the sectors are based on actual data and some are models. The model is, I think when they start in 2015, that it's ground truthed and it's accurate. And then when they go forward, they're assuming that there's going to be improvements made to the transportation network that are anticipated through Plan Bay Area. So they're assuming that those will be made. Now they update the model and they update their calculations every few years. So they do kind of go back and adjust to make sure that we are reflecting reality. But it is a model. It's not the best. It would be great if we could have actual data, but there's just, at least at this point, there isn't year to year annual actual data for transportation.
And do we feel like there's a way we can characterize the error of it? Is it plus or minus 2, plus or minus 5, or is it pretty spot on? Do we have
that?
a sense of
That I don't know.
Okay.
I think, but we could have a conversation with MTC to find out.
Fair enough. Yeah. In the staff report, it talks about providing the calculations with commercial and industrial emissions mixed in. Would there be any value to have being for the community to be able to see kind of two numbers? One that is with, I think it's important to take them in total, but also to understand them disaggregated over time, just to see, if I'm a community member, a resident, what is the impact overall of residences versus commercial and industrial? They're both important, and it falls inside the city's purview to develop policies for both. But I'd be curious if you think that there's any value in disaggregating the two.
Yeah, we used to, for like the built environment, we used to disaggregate it between residential and commercial. So we kind of lumped electricity and natural gas together for residential and lumped the two together for commercial. And so that's how we were reporting it. And then we made the decision for a couple of reasons that it was better to just look at natural gas because our electricity was getting so much cleaner, and that we really needed to put more focus on natural gas. So that's why we started separating it that way. We do have the data, at least for San Rafael, we could still report and break it out by commercial and residential use. For some of the smaller jurisdictions, we run into privacy laws with PG&E. So that's just another reason why we decided to stop breaking it between residential and commercial use, so that we would have a consistent reporting across all of the jurisdictions. For the other sectors, unfortunately, like waste, we don't know how much is coming. We can make a guess how much is coming from the residential versus the commercial sector, but we just don't know. That's probably true for most of the other sectors. Water, certainly. For transportation, we know how much is passenger vehicles versus commercial vehicles, but like how many of those passenger vehicles are used for commuting to jobs in San Rafael? We wouldn't be able to disaggregate that. So it would be, if we tried to do like a commercial inventory versus a residential inventory, there would be just a lot of holes and assumptions that we were making. And I think that would probably make it less useful. Again, we could take a look at the electricity and natural gas use if that was really helpful for the city in identifying specific programs that they wanted to develop.
Got it. And then, as we look to the future, potentially, this is just one option. And I know I spoke with Corey about this earlier, but as we are able to take de-identified, say, cell phone data in terms of where trips originate and where they go, can we make assumptions around based on velocity and destination? We can start making assumptions on if this was a car ride versus a bicycle or pedestrian ride. Is that something that would change how we think about VMT?
So the VMT data that we have, that we get from MTC, is actually showing trips that are made within San Rafael, so we can see, and it even disaggregates it more than that, whether it's a Marin resident or a Marin worker, and, whether they're traveling within San Rafael or they're going somewhere else, and what the VMT is, so that we can kind of mine that data for a lot of policy, help in formulating policy and programs. Biking and pedestrian use is much trickier. Essentially, we use the American Community Survey, which surveys residents and how they get to work. And, but that's just a very small subset of what that use is. And sometimes, like, the county's done projects in the past where they've done, you have to go out and do actual counts. Stand on, a bike path and take counts. And even then it's still, it's a survey of a few days, a few points in time. So that would need to be done if you wanted any additional data around that. So
cool. I think we all noticed on the overall emissions graph, 2007, 2008 was the peak, I'm using air quotes. And then it seemed to have a pretty steady decline. Was there any specific event that would explain why that was the peak and why there was a steady decline after that?
Sure. It's really about the carbon intensity of electricity. So if you look at electricity, it depends on what's used to generate that electricity. So if it's being natural gas or if it's coal, those have a much higher carbon intensity than if it's hydroelectric or if it's nuclear, which have zero greenhouse gas emissions, essentially. So in 2007 and 2008, PG&E, the emission factor, the carbon intensity of that electricity was at its peak in 2007, 2008. And then Marin Clean Energy came online and was available to San Rafael residents and businesses starting in 2010. The state passed the Renewable Portfolio Standard in 2002. So that started kind of kicking in and taking effect. So PG&E started greening their electricity, sourcing it from more renewable sources. And so that's why it started to decline after 2008, and then a big jump after 2010 with MCE.
Yeah, and so I'll reflect back what I think I'm hearing, which is it had nothing to do with any specific policy that San Rafael adopted. It had to do with a macroscopic change around energy policy at the state level.
That's true. Most of it did, and that's why what Corey was saying about the low-hanging fruit, the kind of easier things, although, of course, getting a CCA back in 2010 was actually a very big effort. But, those kinds of things have already been done. At this point, we need to rely more on really personal action and changing personal behavior in order to continue to further reduce emissions.
Which leads me into my next question around personal behavior. And I know, really when we look at this report, a lot of it is really focused on the inbound emissions. And I think it does make reference to upstream emissions as being, on average, as many as 3 and 4 times the actual amount of inbound. And so when I think about, and it's listed, some of them include around, air travel, food consumption, delivery, and packaging. Could you comment a little bit? I mean, and I want to use this moment because this is a public hearing to talk to community members around what are some personal choices that folks can make that actually make an end-to-end difference in our emissions.
Sure. So there is so when I was referring earlier to the consumption-based inventory that the Air Quality District did, there's actually a chart that was prepared for that as well, and it's in the Climate Action Plan. And so when you look at that chart, you see, some of the big sectors that would be considered consumption-based that we're not including come from air travel, food consumption, and then consumption of goods and services. So, of course, reducing your air travel would be significant, and just reducing purchases of goods and services would also go a long way to reducing those kind of consumption-based emissions. So reusing things, repairing things, rather than buying new items all the time really helps. And then food consumption. So it's hard to just say, well, let's reduce food consumption, but one can certainly buy what you need as opposed to, so that there's less food waste. That can really help as well.
Great, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add a few more. Again, it's so nice to have you here and to have this public hearing, the discussion. You had made a comment or talked about the all-electric ordinance that the city of San Rafael had passed earlier, and as part of our REACH code. And as I understand it, there are lawsuits that are around that. Could you speak to how that might affect our greenhouse gas emissions and our goals?
Sure. So they're a little bit in limbo. It was a lawsuit against the city of Berkeley for a similar ordinance, and the initial outcome of the lawsuit was that the ordinance was legal compared to federal law. It was appealed by the California Restaurant Association, I believe, and this Ninth Circuit Court, a three-panel judges, ruled that it actually was in conflict with federal law, federal energy efficiency law, and the city of Berkeley has since appealed and asked for an en banc review by the whole Ninth Circuit. So it's a little bit up in the air right now. We'll be meeting with the city attorney soon, city attorney's office soon to dig into that a little bit more and understand where it places us in our current ordinance, as well as where it places us with regard to some of the things we're considering for existing buildings. We have this opportunity right now because there's so much housing that we're asking to be built and wanting to be built and is being built. And there's so, it's a good time to have ordinances like that to really drive emissions down, because once buildings are there, when you want to retrofit later, it's very expensive. It's very challenging. Anybody that's done home repair knows that you end up finding all kinds of things that you didn't know about. So we'd really like to be able to get that in place while this development is happening and make sure it can be utilized. So to be determined, and we're hoping to bring some policy forward for existing buildings sometime in the next 6 months or so. Does that answer your question? And Rob, do you want to add anything?
You summarized it well, Corey. I have nothing to add.
And as I understand, our ordinance was different in some significant ways to what Berkeley did. So we might not have that same restriction put on what we've approved.
We have some exemptions that may be able to be utilized for some folks. So for instance, the Restaurant Association was who sued, and we exempted restaurants. Restaurants can be, you can get a lot of emissions reductions if you apply it to restaurants, but it can also be super expensive depending on the restaurant. So so we did exempt that and figured we could add that at a later date. But still to be determined. It's not significantly different that we're confident yet. We need to do that legal assessment.
Yeah, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one. I'm curious if there are any state mandates that affect the work that we're trying to do here. I mean, you're giving us our snapshot, as it were, of our greenhouse gas emissions. And if there's any, since the last update, if there's anything that the state has said that you need to be doing this. I mean, one that comes to mind, the banning gas-powered leaf blowers, but are there other mandates that are coming down that will also enable us, nudge us, help us to continue to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions over the next upcoming years?
Sure. I know of some, and I'll see if Christine wants to add any, but, for heavy duty vehicles, there are mandates now to move to zero emission vehicles within the next several years. And there are a lot of questions about the infrastructure and the ability to be able to do that at this point, but it's a mandate. And so we've been talking with Marin Sanitary Service about it. We've been talking about the whole Anderson corridor. Mm-hmm. We've got PG&E, we've got CMSA, we've got Golden Gate Transit and Marin Sanitary Service all nearby. Is there some way to share resources and be able to build an electrical infrastructure to be able to serve all of these entities, and help with that transition? So a lot to be determined, but there's one law that's significant that really could drive emissions reductions. I just saw on the Climate One podcast, they were talking about how even though there's this big increase in electric vehicles, we're not seeing a lot of dramatic reductions because of heavy duty vehicles and transport, things like that. So that's one thing as an example. And do you know of others, Christine?
Yes, I have a whole list. For you.
Okay. Just top line.
All right. So the state passed, as you probably know, they passed regulations that will require all light duty vehicles that are sold in California to be zero emission vehicles starting in 2035. and then medium and heavy duty vehicles that will have to be zero emission vehicles starting in 2045. They also passed regulations that will require all newly manufactured small off-road equipment to be zero emissions starting in 2024. So that's leaf blowers, but that's also, there's a lot of other different, there's a lot of other different kinds of landscape equipment, portable generators as well that will be required to be zero emission in 2045. Pressure washers, that sort of thing. The state building code has requirements, of course, and we've already talked about your ordinance. The Air Quality District has a ban on the sale and installation of natural gas water heaters in the Bay Area starting in 2027. So that's for the small ones for residential uses. And then natural gas heating systems, there will be a ban on the sale and installation of heating systems beginning in 2029. And then large and commercial and multifamily buildings, their water heaters will also have to be zero emission by 2031. Zero waste, I think you're familiar with. So that's a requirement that 75% of organic waste that's put into the landfill has to be reduced by 2025. There is a requirement that all transit agencies have to use, well, currently they must use renewable diesel. And then beginning in 2029, all of their purchases for new vehicles, buses have to be zero emission vehicles and starting in 2029. There's also a requirement that renewable electricity, so all electricity providers will have to provide zero carbon electricity by 2045. That's pretty much all of what the state's doing. It's quite a lot, actually.
Yeah. No, it is. No, I appreciate that. And I know the transit agencies are looking at that. And it's interesting about the other agencies. I hadn't thought about that in terms of the heavy duty vehicles. And that really goes to my last question, which is so much of what you listed. And Corey, you said this in your introduction, that the city has 1% of our overall gas emissions. Well, you just listed the residential requirements that are coming down the pike. So outreach and education is a big part of this. And I'm sure if you want to get into the next part of your presentation, do that. But I really would like to talk about or get your sense of how do we get residents to do more, knowing that you just, you have the ban on water heaters, as you said, gas water heaters in the next 5 years. Like that's something that the city, how do we get residents to do that? So if you could speak to the outreach or the education part.
Sure. Well, as you know, we have resilient neighborhoods here, and we try to get our residents to sign up for those kinds of classes. And their average reduction carbon footprint reduction per household going through is about 33%. Now that's an opt-in program, and it's a small percentage of our households that go through that, but then they also become people that tell their friends and neighbors, right? And they continue on. So it does expand exponentially. Also, the other piece that we've been noticing, especially with this green building piece, is that there's so many incentives and resources, it becomes noise, and helping cut through that noise is really important. Like, so we just today, our part-time assistant that's been helping with this, Shannon Mackel, developed the 7 steps to electrify. And it's very clear, and it's cut through all that noise, and it just has 1 or 2 links per step and just very simple instructions. So if you're a homeowner that doesn't really know where to start, this 1-page document is a great place. So those are the types of things that, just as 2 examples of ways that I think that we can do it, but it's challenging. 20 years ago when I was working here, I could send out a press release and it would get picked up by lots of news agents. Now I've got to know Instagram and TikTok and all these things. So, everybody gets their news sources from different places now is the point. You used to have a few places and you got your bases covered. So it's definitely a bigger lift and more challenging to do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think we've seen that with the ban on the gas-powered leaf blowers. And I'm sure we all still hear them in the neighborhood, but how do we continue to do that outreach and education as we go forward? It's critical. Okay, I know we're going to have more questions, but we'll let you go on to the 2021-2023 accomplishments.
Great. We'll start with the accomplishments. I'll go over them quickly, and then we'll dive into the 2-year priority work plan. So these are the 6 areas around sustainability that were priority work areas, and I'll talk about them in detail, and I'll talk about our illegal dumping program, which is also a part of our priorities, but doesn't really reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So in the first bucket, electric vehicles policies and programs, we did help develop the countywide EV strategy, which we'll be talking about later in the meeting. and we adopted this new construction charger reach code. And the big piece about that, that we talked about a little earlier, is that if you want people to adopt electric vehicles, you have to have a solid charging infrastructure, and renters don't have that right now. And to retrofit later is really hard. So for new construction, we have very clear guidelines on what you need to do now. And we've increased the amount of chargers and electric vehicle readiness in the parking for multifamily dwellings dramatically, which we think will really help with that transition and make sure that people that are renters have access to charging. And we've added some EVs to the fleet as well. In the mandatory composting realm, SB 1383 was a huge state law that we've been working with, and it included requiring that we adopt a local ordinance that mandates that all organic materials be kept out of landfill. That's your paper products, that's plant material, that's food as well. It also requires that certain businesses that produce food or restaurants of certain sizes donate edible food to people in need. And we're lucky that we have some good organizations here that do that. We also been working with Zero Waste Marin, and we've updated our contract with the Marin Sanitary Service that Council adopted last year to make sure that their programs are in line with this new ordinance, and adopted a reusable foodware ordinance. So several things in this area that we did in the past couple of years. Then we hired an adaptation planner to really get started on adaptation planning, specifically around sea level rise. We've secured $1.4 million in grants now to do that, to do assessments and to work with community members as well to look at not only the physical vulnerability, but the social vulnerability, right? When you protect an area, you can cause displacement. So we need to be very mindful of that and integrate those two in our planning. And so that collaboration is underway right now with Canal Alliance, Multicultural Center Marin, and the County of Marin. Then the microgrids assessment and development. A microgrid, again, is where you have solar, you generate your own electricity, you have some way to store it, usually battery, and then you have a way to island from the grid. So when the grid goes down, the power is out, you can still run your facility or your set of facilities. This is one that we didn't get very far. We were applying for some grants that were really prioritized towards equity communities, and we didn't quite live up to what we needed to be able to get those grants. So we didn't get very far. We did do some resilience hub trainings and participated in these Bay Area wide trainings. It included some of our community partners. The idea of a resilience hub is not only a microgrid, but a facility that really serves the community during a time of a disaster. So building energy efficiency and electrification, we adopted the Green Building Reach Code, which Christine mentioned, and we started to work on, which I just alluded to earlier, these incentive and technical assistance things that are available to people as well. And we're participating right now in the countywide building electrification plan, which is to look holistically at how do you transition new buildings and existing buildings toward electric and greater energy efficiency. And then this program, I mentioned that we wanted to elevate an equity lens and an economic lens in our climate action planning. So this was a very specific project saying, well, what if we overlay those goals with climate action? Where are the things in our climate action plan that really drive economic and workforce development as well, and make sure there's access to good green jobs and things in San Rafael? We started some focus groups and done some surveys, and we're partway through. I understand our consultant has a draft of our report with all the findings right now, and we still have a few more engagements to do as well. And then our illegal dumping team, we did a ton of work around that, debris box fulls of work, including updating our online data and story map and doing some pilots with the Mattress Recycling Council and others. And this very cool thing with this unwanted stuff flyer that we sent to all multifamily dwellings in San Rafael, which is in 2 languages and also has a QR code and a refrigerator magnet, because if you're a subtenant, you don't necessarily see what comes in the mail, but most people use the refrigerator. So we have that available too. And then, this is all about our sustainability division and our goals, but there's a ton that's going on in other departments as well. So it's just a smattering, but I don't pretend to capture everything here, from the gas leaf blower ordinance that Mayor Kate mentioned to the wildfire mitigation, our new policy around transportation emissions and vehicle miles traveled, downtown plans to combine transit and housing, and bike and pedestrian infrastructure, which I tend to use a lot. And so that's the accomplishments, and then we'll dive into the next 2 years. So we have 11 priority areas, but the box had 12. And then we have 7 that are carryovers. We do 2-year priorities because things do carry over, right? They take a long time. 3 new things, 1 ongoing, and then the EV work plan, which is on the council agenda later tonight. So the first one is really integrating more strategically climate action and sustainability measures into all the departments. We have departments doing great stuff. We also have the processes and ways that we do things that are old ways that just don't integrate that. So we're finding ways to really integrate it and make sure it's not a baked on or a sprinkled on later, but baked on from the beginning, including looking at contracts and in some cases, maybe even integrating it into department goals. For SB 1383 and our organic programs and our waste reduction programs, we'll be working a lot with Zero Waste Marin. I'm really happy to report they've really stepped up. They have a new executive director, and they are taking on a lot of the work for a lot of the local agencies, including the procurement stuff, which you've heard me talk about before. We have to buy 130 times as much compost and mulch every year than we currently do. So we started this procurement study, and then a lot of other jurisdictions wanted to join in, and then Zero Waste Marin took up the mantle. I was able to hand that off to them, and they're knee deep in it. And we were just doing some ground truthing with our Parks Department recently. So we should have that finished pretty soon. And then we'll really have a gap analysis. What do we need to buy? How much area do we have to put it? What's it going to cost? And how do we deal with it? Zero Waste Marin's been talking with brokers, so we may have some really easy ways to get it out to carbon farms and things like that in West Marin. But the biggest issue is going to be beginning enforcement. So next year we have to start enforcement in January. So that could be challenging, and we'll work with Marin Sanitary Service to have the easiest, best glide path for people to comply. And then, as we talked about, we're going to have to do more things and bigger and better things, and we have limited resources. So we want to explore financing options as well. So we can go after grants as much as we want, but grants are very time limited, very specific. We need to look at some other ways of having ongoing funding and building our capacity to do more. So one area that we'll be looking at is this climate resilience district, which is like an enhanced infrastructure financing district. It's very similar, but it's anything to do with climate change, anything to do with resilience and greenhouse gas reductions. And is there a there for San Rafael? So the finance director, Paul, and I were meeting about it today, and some other folks, and we'll try to understand whether or not that's a viable tool for San Rafael. In terms of our electric vehicle strategy work plan that's on tonight's agenda, again, transportation is a huge source of our emissions, and passenger vehicles are a big piece of it. So that's why there's the focus on electric vehicle transition and adoption. There's a lot of other things we can do in terms of making sure we reduce emissions in the transportation sector. There's a lot of agencies working on that, but we're going to focus tonight on the electric vehicle strategy work plan. And then building energy efficiency, we talked about that as well. The idea is to really address existing buildings in our next round of policies, and then to work with the county to finish the countywide electrification plan. And I've wrapped microgrids and did this just to be keeping an eye out for opportunities. If there are opportunities, especially funding opportunities, because it's expensive, then we'll go after those as well. And then we want to finish and bring to the council and to the economic subcommittee, development subcommittee, our low carbon economy report, and where the opportunities are for the city. What can the city do? We don't really drive the economy, but we have some other levers that we can use, such as, removing obstacles, to convening people. Some of our focus groups and convenings have brought people together that hadn't ever really talked about this stuff together before. And then we'll have the findings and recommendations, and we'll put together some things that we could do in the next year or two. And then for illegal dumping, I'll be bringing that back in October with the Marin sanitary rates, but we're really wrapping up some of the financial and policy analysis. Our plan was by the end of 2024 to have a suite of things for you to consider, and what the costs will be and what we think the anticipated outcomes will be. And then for our sea level rise project, we want in the next 2 years, we'll finish our canal collaboration. We'll identify some high-level community priorities, and one of the grants requires that we have one project that comes out of it. It doesn't have to be a big project, but some project that the community can rally around that gets us a little bit further, and maybe as a pilot or something that helps us build in more resiliency to sea level rise. And then we'll also be looking at the planning process for a multi-hazard climate resilience plan, whether that's its own plan or tagging onto some other plan or some planning effort. We're not sure. There's this idea of climate impacts, and then there's other disasters, natural disasters, and does it make sense to have them be separate? How's the best way to do this? So that's the investigation that we're doing right now. But one thing is, we don't want to look just at adaptation. We need to be looking at emergency preparedness and resilience planning, both at the individual and community level. And then finally, this was added in as a way just to capture what we do all the time anyway. State laws come down and we need to respond. We need to advocate for them being done the right way at the outset, right? So we need to stay involved with that, and we do. And so this is just a way to capture that and just raise it to consciousness that this is part of our work program ongoing as well. And then finally is the volunteer program. The idea is to rethink what is the essential there for the volunteer program going forward. It's been a wonderful program. We've had millions I mean, thousands and thousands of volunteers go through that have contributed millions of dollars in benefit to the city over the years. But even prior to COVID, we were seeing things change and seeing, what people are interested in doing change. We were seeing a lot of staff changes and some drops in volunteerism in certain departments and things. And we still have robust community programs like litter cleanups and broom pulls and neighborhood projects that we enable. But it's really to survey departments and look at what is the new there for the volunteer program and how do we move forward with that. So that's the 2-year priorities going forward. And thank you to Councilmember Joran Scalati for working with us on that and our community members as well. We bring it to the Climate Action Plan group with quarterly meetings and get feedback on them as well. So thank you.
Thank you. So we'll see if there are any questions on both accomplishments as well as the priorities. And I'll start with the Vice Mayor, who is our liaison to the Climate Change Action Plan group.
No, can I just clap?
Yeah, you can clap later.
I think it's really amazing. All the work is so complex and all the different solutions and being able to tackle so many things is just incredible. So I guess the question that I have, and I already know some of the answers, but we have, as you mentioned, like great community members, and how easy or feasible it is to have community members helping writing grants. That might be helpful for us because I know that sometimes that create more work for the staff members. So that's just a question that I have. And the other one, I think it is kind of like part of the solution. How can we, there's so much information around climate change. A lot of it is scientific. How can I make it very easy to understand for all of us so we know that we can all make a difference if we just change things like in the water treatment plant. I didn't know that you can only flush the toilet paper because if you flush Kleenex, they actually become garbage. And then, so little things like that they are very simple that we don't know. So any chance that we can do, I don't know, like a contest in high schools or how can we, or maybe it's like a county-wide effort. So just curious to see if you have some ideas.
So in terms of the first one, community members writing grants, I love that. One of the ways that we were even talking about reimagining the volunteer program prior to the pandemic was, and by the way, we had a big drop in volunteerism during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And it does take staff to supervise volunteers. Care and feeding volunteers is very important, right? And so one of the things we were talking about was just high impact volunteers and how do we utilize volunteers on a project basis more than ongoing, right? And how do we identify people that maybe have retired but have great skill sets that want to give back to their community? And so grant writing is a perfect combination of volunteerism and sustainability. So I love that idea. And then in terms of the easy to make a difference, yeah, we think about that a lot. We put together the San Rafael climateaction.org website with the climate role models. We fell off the boat on that one in the past couple of years with the pandemic, and we hadn't been doing as much about it. But we have that website, we have the climate role model piece, and we're getting some new fellows soon. And I think that kind of outreach is really important. I think what we found is that when people can see themselves doing something, they're more likely to do it. It's easier. And so trying to get a variety of community members and spotlight them and find ways to promote what they did is really helpful. And that's one of Resilient Neighborhoods tax, which we could definitely borrow from. Just takes time and effort.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilmember Hill, questions?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I don't have questions. I have comments. Is now the right time?
No, let's just stick with questions.
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it to a question. In the equitable low carbon economy, is that report looking at our large businesses? Because being in the largest city within the county, we have a number of large businesses, and I'm thinking of like Comcast and Kaiser and the schools. How are their emissions reflected in our numbers, and are our policies applying to them as well?
Yes, most of them are. I'm trying to think if there are exceptions for some of the schools sometimes, but most of those emissions are captured if they're in San Rafael proper. And most of our policies do apply to them. I think there are some instances where they don't apply to schools because, like, for instance, I'm trying to remember if our green building policies maybe don't apply to schools. And working with large employers and small employers, I think one of the big questions we've been holding with that project is what is a green job and what is a green job in San Rafael? A green job in Denver is going to be a very different thing than a green job in San Rafael. We're not a big city. We're a small city in a small county, right? So what are we really looking at there? And where is a meaningful change going to happen? So that's what we've been exploring. And what are those sectors and so, the clean energy sector is an obvious one. And what does that apply here? Well, it actually does apply here. And we have some great businesses that do on-the-job training and are really clear that if I hire at a $25 an hour and I get a commitment from an employee, I can train them to do what they need to do. And in 6 months, I will guarantee a living wage at $32 an hour. If you stick with me, I stick with you. And so those are some of those exciting conversations we've had where then other employers go, really, you do that? So solar companies are talking to electricians, which when we started the program, we were hearing that, solar people in the solar industry were saying, I don't even know how to electrify my home. I don't know how you do that. And we're saying, wow, you're in the solar industry, And so bringing those folks together is one of the things that we can do. These kind of convenings can be very valuable going forward. So it is in bigger businesses. It is in schools and health. Now that the pandemic is, for the most part, in our rearview mirror, the county health department, and we've been talking with them, with Lisa Santora about this and some of her staff about how we can combine our efforts, and they've come and spoken to MCEP as well.
Great.
So, yep.
And harder question, what happens if we don't reach our goals?
Yeah. Talking about what keeps me up at night.
Going to, but I mean, just in case.
Boy, I mean, how do you answer that? I don't know. Do you have any? If we don't meet our greenhouse gas reduction, I mean, there's no penalty. We just keep watching things get worse and worse.
Right.
One of the hopes is that more and more cities that are doing good work will be inspirations to other cities, and that but everybody needs to come along. So to your point about residents versus businesses, at this point, it's all in. We can make decisions about how much time and effort we put into one over another, but the reality is everybody's got to be in. We've got to somehow engage everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any additional follow-up questions, so we will open up public comment and really appreciate the emails and letters that we already received prior to this evening. And I look to the room. Mr. Carney, welcome.
I have to be first up here on a night like this. This is wonderful,
Yes,
wonderful stuff. Bill Carney, Sustainable San Rafael. We're very pleased to see that the most recent estimates of greenhouse gas emissions show San Rafael is halfway to the city's goal of cutting emissions in half by 2030, and continues on a trajectory to meet that goal and the 2045 goal of net zero emissions if the yearly rate of reduction since 2005 can be sustained. And that's the big challenge I think we're all talking about tonight. It won't be easy. And we appreciate that the city's proposed 2-year climate action priorities are in fact focused on redoubling efforts to reduce the largest and the most intractable remaining sources of climate pollution within our boundaries. First and foremost, these include gas cars and trucks, which are 66% of emissions. Speeding the adoption of electric vehicles is essential to reach our goals, the city's goals, and to help people prepare for the state's mandates. Likewise, with gas furnaces, water heaters, and other appliances, which account for 25% of fossil fuel use. Again, to meet our goals, we've really got to focus down on that. And electrifying existing buildings with heat pump replacement appliances is key to accomplishing that. We also commend your continuing coordination with the county and other jurisdictions to advance these climate priorities, including the participation of Councilmember Lawrence Galati on the board of MarinCan, a new countywide public-private partnership. And the steering committee of MarinCan actually asked me to convey its appreciation to San Rafael for moving forward with these very proactive priorities. And they hope to work closely with the city in implementing the key climate solutions that we need to reach both of our goals. So thank you for your ongoing climate leadership.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you do with Sustainable San Rafael, working in conjunction. Hi, Howard.
Hello, my name is Howard Schwartz. I'm a San Rafael resident. Some of you may remember me from my earlier work on Housing First. Since retirement, I've become involved in Sustainable San Rafael because I feel like the climate crisis is the existential issue of our day. I'm impressed with all the work the city has done to date, and with the 33% reduction in greenhouse gases since 2005. The 2030 goal of reaching 40% reduction over 1990 levels requires us to accelerate and redouble our efforts. In addition to speeding the adoption of electric vehicles and the electrification of existing buildings, I put in a heat pump this summer, by the way. Sustainable San Rafael supports the climate priorities listed in the staff report on page 7. In addition, we urge the city to keep pursuing 2 additional action strategies in support of its 2030 and 2045 climate goals. The first, MCE 100% renewable electricity system-wide, which would greatly reduce San Rafael's remaining 6% of emissions that are attributable to electricity. And then carbon sequestration in the city's urban forest, which would be greatly increased with the implementation of the tree programs in the General Plan 2040 and the Climate Change Action Plan 2030. Trees are, as you know, our primary way in which San Rafael can grow sequestration needed to zero out the 15% greenhouse gas emissions remaining in 2045. Thank you all for your leadership in helping lead us in doing our part in the community. And if we can't, maybe answering Rachel, if we can't reach 40% by 2030, who can? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Welcome, Belle.
Years. It's a pleasure to be here, address you. I'm Belle Cole, and I'm speaking on behalf of Organizing for Action in Marin. And my comments reflect my deep involvement with the Marin Biomass Project and the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership that collaborates with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority in mitigating climate risk. And we accept the reasoning and the recommendations of the past 2 people who just spoke on behalf of Sustainable San Rafael, the September 1 letter. And we too are very pleased to see that the most recent estimates of greenhouse gas emissions show that San Rafael is halfway to the city's goal of cutting emissions in half by 2020. And we welcome the new proposed climate priorities that include integrating climate actions in department goals and projects, exploring a climate resilient district, and reimagining the volunteer program. And I look forward to staying close to development of these new proposals, especially the climate resilient district fascinates me. I'm pleased with the priority given to the new mandatory composting ordinance in compliance with SB 1383 and the mandatory recycling and organics item in the 21-23 priorities to identify opportunities for organic waste diversion that also sequesters carbon. The Marin Biomass Project hopes to identify such opportunities in its study that is now underway, including composting to enrich agricultural soils in West Marin and biochar to help soils retain more carbon and more moisture throughout the county. I look forward to continue working with Corey on such possibilities. We also applaud the city for incorporating much of the countywide EV acceleration strategy into its own strategy. This response should serve as a model for other jurisdictions. As someone who drives a Honda plug-in. I have driven on electricity for 2 to 3 years without once buying gasoline.
Thank you. If you could wrap up, Bill.
I especially admire the Ride and Dream Clan campaign to get everyone into EVs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll get to talk more about EVs at the next agenda item as well. Welcome. Yep, and thank you for your patience.
My name is John Midgard. Thank you for this thing and awesome presentation, you guys. You covered, and answered most of the questions. So I would just zoom in. It's interesting how this all ties in, from the people that called in earlier, and they wanted the safe bike lanes, and then you're talking about transit. That part has to be together to be green, because we have the pie in the sky is that people would actually choose not to have cars. Because putting everybody in a big electric car is not going to do it. We're going to have, because we got to, and so I'm wondering, is there any thought about batteries, and is there a way to mandate that they be recyclable, or somehow the connectors are always universal? If you're going to order things, it's got to be universal so you can keep reusing this stuff instead of throwing it away. And then, so I was going to get down into the nuts and bolts. I'm an energy consultant, have been for 30 years, doing it with the California Energy Code. And I've been filling out these checklists. You're talking about checklists earlier. You got to be careful with checklists that you don't put things on it that people don't understand, whoever's supposed to enforce it. And I see that all the time. So the reach codes, you got to be careful what you put in the reach codes, because I know for a fact that they're not, it's not understood. And so, the California Energy Code is pretty strong, right? Like it is, and to try and do a reach code. Oh, well, actually, to talk about the heat pump, everything going, electrification concerns me, right? It's good. We spent all these years trying to get people going from gas water tanks to all these really high 90%, 92, 93% water heaters. And those work really well. And then we're making them do the heat pump water heaters that aren't necessarily working that well. And it's a whole other challenge, because you have to have a lot of it. Have to have a lot of water there. So anyway, in other words, you got to be, maybe the electrification is a good idea, but it's going to have to ease into it. And we got to try and see that we can recycle we have to hold the renewables responsible as the fossil fuels. It's all extractive to make those panels and those batteries. So in other words, we don't want everybody, like we have now, everybody and all their kids and all their kids on electric bikes.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Al. Welcome.
Council members, how are you today? You look in like beautiful blouse you have. Presentation was excellent. It was beautiful, wonderful. When I look at statistics, I always get question comes into mind is how does it apply to me? And seeing a pie chart obviously is helpful for managing a project to its completion, but I can't tell how we compare to other cities of similar size. Are we better, worse, the same? Are we on the same track? Are we using similar processes to achieve the goals that we've set aside for ourselves? So that's just one general question. Just as a personal thing, when the beginning of the summer, for some reason, I decided not to drive my car for the next 4 months. I don't know why I did that, but I did it. And in doing that, I learned a lot about public transportation and how getting around might not. Thinking, oh, this would be easy to get around. It's not, and it wasn't. Still here. I fed myself. I got up in the morning, so it wasn't a terrible thing, but it was a difficult chore. And when I get back in my car in another month or two, I'll be having finished this experiment. I'll be glad of it. And unfortunately, it will be a gas-powered car for now until I can get an electric one. My second question had more to do with education. Again, from a personal thing, I live in an apartment complex. We have receptacles that are designed to take particular garbage, but I never received anything on how to use them. And I know the other tenants in my building aren't using them properly because they throw whatever they want, wherever they want. And I'm assuming that if they were to use it properly, it would be more effective. Last one, if I can run over a little bit, if I would like to make some suggestions, where could I forward those rather than having to read through all of them here? Is there a location, just send them to the city council and you can get them to the right place? Is that how?
We will ask all these questions. These are excellent questions. We'll have Corey answer.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Writing notes. Anyone else in the chambers? Not seeing anyone else. Is there anyone online who'd like to comment on this item?
I do see a few hands raised.
Hi, Mayor Kate, members of the City Council. This is Warren Wells, Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. Transportation is a clear majority of our activity-based emissions in San Rafael, nearly 2/3. Roughly half those are personal automobiles. So, that's a huge part of what we need to be focusing on, particularly because the city controls nearly all the streets and roads and its boundaries. Looking at the 10 action strategies, the only one that focuses on transportation is implement the county's EV adoption strategy. And while EVs are obviously an important part of the equation, I think it does miss the importance of reducing driving. And currently, less than 5% of all San Rafael's cars are electric. We could triple that, and still 80% of the cars in the city would be gas-powered. If we're going to meaningfully reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we have to VMT, vehicle miles traveled, reductions are a must. This isn't just my opinion. The State Air Resources Board in its 2022 scoping plan showed that we need a 25% reduction in VMT from 2019 to 2030. So even with aggressive EV uptake, we have to drive less. The EV adoption strategy, I know that's a little later, lists several barriers to EV adoption. 2 barriers with respect to e-bikes and e-scooters are lack of secure parking and lack of safe, protected cycling infrastructure. Despite those recommendations, there's a notable lack of policy guidance in the county's 36 recommendations with the 20 in the proposed work plan. If we need to reduce driving to hit our climate goals, and I think it's clear we do, and the only way to do that without limiting people's mobility is to give them options besides driving, then where is the action strategy to give people options to get around without driving or without getting in their car? The barriers to walking and biking in our city are real. We have the power to remove them by making our streets friendly for people of all ages and abilities. It's not just a safety issue, which I think would be important enough on its own, but also a climate issue. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Warren.
Good evening. My name is Sue Saunders, and I am volunteer with many Marin climate groups. And I'm so pleased to be having this conversation tonight. As has been said, natural gas appliances and gas-powered vehicles are responsible for the majority of emissions driving climate change and poor health outcomes, because what is toxic for the planet is toxic for us humans. Fleet electrification presents a real challenge for Marin jurisdictions. Many have old trucks that need to be replaced and too few options currently on the market. It is going to take real commitment to electrification to not replace our fleets with gas. There are several trucks coming to the market in the next couple of years. And if it simply cannot wait, I hope that San Rafael and all Marin jurisdictions will buy used rather than put a new gas car on the road. In the conversation about reducing emissions from transportation, I'm excited about the role e-bikes can play. Many people who may not be able to afford the purchase of a new or even used electric vehicle could buy an e-bike. And people may ask what I can do, what can I do? And electrify everything is what people can do. And there is lots of money to do so coming from both the federal, state, and local governments. And in fact, by the end of 2023, from the Anti-Inflation Reduction Act, there is going to be rebates for everything along with the tax credits that are available now. For example, there will be a rebate for $8,000 to replace a gas furnace with an all-electric heat pump that also provides air conditioning, along with a $2,000 tax credit. And there's going to be many more examples of that to electrify all appliances in your home. You can go to rewiringamerica.org to learn about federal incentives and the switches on for all the local incentives. And at the end of 2023, California will be providing up to $12,000
Thank you, Sue. We look forward to your additional comments. Do email us. We always want to know about rebates and grants. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Reeves, and I'm here representing Marine Conservation League. The scale of the climate crisis is hard to overestimate. Avoiding its worst impacts and coping with those that are now inevitable will require systemic changes in practically every aspect of human society. Since 1934, Marine Conservation League has been protecting, preserving, and enhancing Marine's natural environment. During much of that time, threats from development and misuse of land have been MCL's primary concern. Now, however, gradually increasing disruption of the Earth's ecosystems due to climate change poses threats of a new and different order. Recent science shows that the atmosphere continues to warm and we are rapidly approaching tipping points that could irreversibly damage the environment as we know it. Marin will not escape these threats. Bold action is required and we can slow and eventually reverse the change. And so I want to give a shout out to Corey. You are just amazing. And the fact that our city has supported you is just incredibly important. And there are a couple of things I want to point out. That when we use gas in our homes, in our businesses, think of the upstream problems that where it's fracked, where it leaks. And the San Rafael ordinance, I'm glad somebody mentioned it, about leaf blowers, there is no oversight in that. You either have to upset your neighbor, there needs to be a change with that. And we need contractor education to required at point of sale and home energy audit. Educate the contractors, lobby the state to require CEUs for electrification. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pam.
Hi, my name's Susan. I'm a resident of San Rafael. And I don't think the city gives enough credit to bicycling infrastructure. The city has yet to fully realize and accomplish its bicycling master plan and expand on safety. And when you're talking about personal choices with climate change, well, people are always going to choose to be safe and no one's going to choose to ride their bikes. The city has yet to realize its full potential for implementing its bicycling infrastructure. There's no really good way to get through downtown San Rafael, which has a ton of car traffic. Northern people from north of San Rafael and west have no way to get to the eastern parts of downtown. So really, until you give people the ability to choose to ride their bikes, they're going to choose safety. So the city should really try to implement its bicycling master plan and expand upon it. And lastly, something a little less related to bikes, but I work in a municipality. I work in urban forestry, and I've seen PG&E install large electric vaults and underground electric lines, and it has decimated the urban canopy. So be careful of unintended consequences of electrification, because we've seen a lot of large tree removals and the inability to replace them due to the distances required to high voltage electric lines. So watch out for how that'll impact the urban canopy, and remember that trees are incredibly important for climate change mitigation, as well as providing clean air and shade. And the shade provided by a tree can be extremely valuable, prevent someone from turning on the air conditioner. And thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you, Susan.
Hello, my name is David Seltzer, San Rafael resident here on Lincoln. And I just wanted to add to the statements that we've also already heard from Warren and from Susan about the importance of reducing those vehicle miles traveled from automobiles. And so that bicycle and walking infrastructure really needs to be an important part of that strategy. EVs are not, to that equity lens that was mentioned in the presentation, EVs are not necessarily that affordable to large swaths of the San Rafael population. And so, more inexpensive, more accessible elements like bicycles, walking, and transit are really critical. And to Susan's point about the safety, our current bicycle infrastructure is such that, you know, you have really nice sections of dedicated path or bike lanes, but they might suddenly end part of the way through, where you then have to jump onto a road and, you know, share just in a lane with traffic, which to a lot of people doesn't feel safe or comfortable, and it's going to dissuade many potential riders and people who would otherwise use a bicycle to travel just a single mile or a couple of miles. But if they don't feel safe doing that between their destinations, they're not going to choose that. And so I think while EVs are certainly important, I think that's just part of the equation. And so yeah, emphasis on complete networks that feel safe and accessible to anyone is incredibly important to get people out of cars. Also, too, EVs have a lot of embedded CO2 costs in the construction and building of these vehicles, which you know, that's another element. So they're better than gas cars, but they still have a carbon impact. So getting people out of cars altogether and making that possible is really important. Thank you for your time, and thank you for having this conversation, because I think it's really important.
Thank you, David.
Good evening. My name is Kate Powers. I just first and foremost want to applaud the city in its efforts in reducing carbon emissions. I have three things that I just wanted to mention quickly. I think that it's really important, and I request that the city looks at all of the development projects that are coming and are in different phases of approval as opportunities to integrate transit early on in the planning process. Northgate Town Center, the development on 4th Street at the old West America site, and also Los Gamos, although that has already been built, it's kind of after the fact that transit is now being seen as being needed there. Also the roundabout at Freitas Parkway, though Caltrans and the city worked together, Golden Gate Transit wasn't really included on the early stages, and I've heard that there's some issues there. I do want to just say that a few weeks ago, my water heater went out. Would have been really easy to replace it with another gas water heater. We had a lot of fear about looking into heat pumps because there were so many unknowns. But I think that the cost of delaying climate action is huge, and that it's all of us. It takes all of us, as Corey said, taking personal steps. And our new water heater works beautifully, and it's a very beautiful piece of equipment to look at. So I just encourage you all to take the plunge. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi there, it's Victoria Holdridge. I applaud the efforts of the council. I wanted to speak first to the Freitas Parkway issue that someone brought up earlier. I agree, it's very, very wide, and it could easily be, the lanes could be normal size and give more space to bicyclists and so forth. And I also wanted to echo the comments of Bell Cole at OFA Marin and Bill Carney at Sustainable San Rafael. And I agree with some of the speakers that talked about the education being the most important, or one of the very important parts. And I agree with that. I think people need to know why we're requesting them to reduce the greenhouse gases. I mean, duh, we know why, but there are a lot of people that just don't get it and what benefit it will bring to them, so that they will take their personal responsibility, even though it's more of a pain in the to have to follow the rules. Anyway, thank you for your work. That's it.
Thank you, Victoria.
I see no other hands raised, and I'll give everyone a moment. I see no further public comment.
Thank you. I'll close the public comment. As always, we got great input and comments, and there were some questions that came out. So I'll just quickly read off what I captured. You might have caught a few more. Batteries, about is there a mandate that they be recyclable? So something to do with batteries.
what to do about, I can't read my handwriting, understanding reach codes. Probably maybe that's to contractors or maybe to homeowners. So comments around reach codes. How do we compare with cities of other size? I'm sorry. How do we compare to cities of our similar size in terms of our efforts? And what are we doing about education regarding recyclables and everything else related to that in multifamily buildings? And then where could residents make suggestions regarding changing resident behavior? We always want to hear input. So what would you tell folks if they had ideas? And then we heard quite a bit about bikes. And so probably if you could just touch on the intersection with what VPAC does and maybe explain a little bit about how those are integrated. And then finally, the role of transit, which I can always weigh in on as well as, and Mary Beth Bushy, Councilmember Bushy is we're in transit. She's not here, but how do we intersect what we're doing at CCAP with all the other transit agencies? So some kind of very specific as well as kind of macro questions there, as well as underscoring the compliment we heard for you.
Great. Thank you. At the high level, I do want to say that, again, this presentation is really about sustainability division and our priorities, and that there are other priorities and goals in other departments as well. And so one of the sustainability division priorities is to work with departments to more integrate some of these things into their department goals and into their processes, right? So that addresses some of what I think was discussed and some of the questions. And then the other high level answer is around things like trees and the bike ped infrastructure. Those are definitely in other department goals. So Public Works has specific project goals with making sure that bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is increased when they do street projects, right? So, and then there is the intersection with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And I think you said the next meeting is in October. Oh, okay, October 4th. So a great place to weigh in. And I think that the Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, there's some updates potentially coming as well, right? So there's a lot of opportunity to get involved. So I think this integration piece in the next couple of years really addresses some of that. We're looking at all sorts of carbon sequestration. One of the first things that I think Director Miller had mentioned at a previous meeting was doing a tree inventory. And so I know that she's pursuing that, and we have offered to have our volunteers and our new fellow help with that. And so our new fellow will start the end of September, and this person actually is interested in becoming an arborist and is very excited about the tree inventory. So, we need to start with what we have, like we do with our greenhouse gas inventory, and understand what we have and where it is, and then we can be more strategic in terms of increasing the trees. On the other hand, it is also a piece of the Public Works program too. And then in terms of battery recycling, so the California Product Stewardship Council has been working with the state on battery recycling requirements. There's a new solar recycling requirements. That's a part of our low carbon economy project too, is really looking at, is there an intersection with solar recycling and solar sales and installation, and being able to go and have a more holistic and sort of job training program. So we've been working on that and looking into it. There are ways that batteries are used right now. Some of the PG&E dispatchable power during those high energy use periods is coming from batteries that are being recycled from other uses that are being used to store power and dispatch it. And I read some articles, I don't know it deeply on the state of recycling batteries, but absolutely we have to pay attention on unintended consequences. I totally agree with John's comment about being extractive and just extracting different types of minerals and having an overall environmental impact. What else in terms of reach code? I'm going to reach out to them about our reach code, especially for existing buildings. And then how do we compare to cities of similar sizes? I'll ask Christine if you want to answer that one.
Well, we do have the Marin Tracker, which shows how San Rafael is doing compared to the other jurisdictions in Marin, both in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions and consumption of energy. There's I think about 11 metrics that we're tracking. So that's really a handy interactive map that anybody can go online and look at. It's marintracker.org. how we're comparing to other communities in the Bay Area is kind of a tricky thing because everybody does their greenhouse gas emission inventories maybe slightly differently. We do standardize them, so we're tracking the same things for all of the Marin jurisdictions. I know there's also quite a few jurisdictions in the Bay Area that don't even do greenhouse gas emissions inventory, so it's hard to say. I think anecdotally, I have heard that the other jurisdictions around the Bay outside of Marin are having a much more difficult time because they've grown a lot faster than Marin has. So it's more difficult for them to reduce emissions just because of their population growth.
And then to the comment about education, one of the things that I'm really big on is behavior change. And there's a lot of data that shows that when it comes to change in behaviors related to the environment, that education doesn't do very much, and that it really requires looking at the audience and understanding the barriers and the things that different communities and audiences are really incentivized by. The idea of being able to tell people how many greenhouse gas emissions you emit and that's going to change behavior that has been shown to not work at all. So it's a little bit more complicated than education. That said, there's basic education that needs to be out there for everything. So that flyer that we sent about what to do with your unwanted junk, most people have no idea that there's a lot of free options for a lot of the things that they produce. Electronic recycling is free right here. There's a local company that has good jobs for local residents, so there is a certain amount of education, and I always get good ideas when we hear comments from people too. And then how to give input, just email sustainability@cityofsanrafael.org, or you can go to cityofsanrafael.org/green, and there'll be a contact information there as well. Best way to do it rather than emailing the council. And then let's see, the role of transit. We could use more comprehensive sort of overall transportation strategy, perhaps. I don't have a lot to add to that. I do agree that we need to get people out of their cars. It is very challenging, as one of the commenters said, to get around to lots of places in Marin on the time that you need to get there. The other piece around behavior change, one of the biggest eye-opening things when we first started to delve into that was if you could incentivize people to take transit by making it free. But if I've got to get my kid to school, then I got to get to work. Then I got to go to the nursing home and see my mom afterwards. Then I got to get groceries, pick up the kid from soccer. A bus ain't going to work, $2 off, or, having a free bus. So there's a lot involved in that that needs to be addressed. We did look at some great projects in the Seattle area, but they're super labor intensive. And, we've been working on this a long time. So it's not something I'm an expert at. I'll see if Christine has anything to add to that. Do you? It's okay if you don't. She doesn't. Okay. But I know that Derek Bigelow reached out from TAM and said we should talk about this some more. So we'll be doing that.
Yeah, and just to add in, both Marin Transit and Transportation Authority Marin talk about this all the time. Those meetings are open to the public. And as I mentioned in my earlier comments, they've started a new countywide transportation working group of which I'm a member. So really looking exactly at this. But I think the point is we all recognize the intersection of both the sustainability goals with what other agencies are doing. And so much of it is having these conversations all together. So we hear like, oh, yeah, we should be linking these two initiatives. And I think there'll be more of that coming in Marin, 100%. I really see that. So just want to add on the transit piece because something we work a lot on at those agencies.
Thank you.
And I think those were all. Could you actually a little bit more on the recyclables? Because I know you've done a lot about multifamily houses and just speaking to.
Sure. I think it's really going to be a challenge. It's the composting piece is the biggest one. There was contamination in recycling. It wasn't as big a deal, but contamination in the composting is going to be a really tough one. So it is really challenging. We talk to people that are managing apartment complexes all the time, and Marin Sanitary's out there. They got 5 outreach staff out there all the time talking to people and trying to educate. And what I'm hearing from apartment managers is I don't care how much I educate my tenants, they just don't seem to get it. So it's going to take some time. And unfortunately, the contamination is going to result in fines too. So it's going to take a lot of heads. And there are Bay Area wide working groups on this. But yeah, it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you. We're not alone in that challenge, is what I hear you saying. Well, I know that my colleagues are really interested in providing additional comments, and I'll start with the Vice Mayor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, thank you so much for the report. I echo I'm a big fan of Corey, but also like the department. I think there's like so many different alternatives and many different priorities, and being able to really touch on pretty much everything and make like having an impact, in our city, I think is amazing. Also, I feel very lucky to be part of this city with this community, because I just look around the room and people that they are connected, and the ones that they are not here tonight. And I think we are very lucky to have people so experienced and also passionate about it. So it gives me hope. I'm excited about aligning every department with around climate change, because I think we need to have an environment and also an equity lens on everything we do, so it can be really efficient for the long term. I think about the manufacturing industry in so many ways and how we can impact that from our little city here in San Rafael. When I'm thinking about packaging, when I'm thinking about even like demand for green energy, especially like in the Central Valley right now, that it doesn't exist and is really damaging that deep green. I agree with everything you said about the marketing and communications. I'm still, amazed that people still don't know that the plastic bags from the stores are not recyclable. They are not recyclable. And why do we still have plastic bags in the stores? I don't know. But I know we have to, target certain things. Within my family, within people I know, they still don't know how to recycle. And they thought that recycle is something that you just put in the bucket, is free, and it disappears from your life. It doesn't. We are getting to a point that there's no more places to put it. So I think I am a firm believer that one of our best ways to educate people is around the kids. If they are telling you to do something, you're going to follow them. But yeah, anything we can do to continue, the great work that we are doing, because also I'm thinking about Marine Sanitary. They always have like great communications with the clients. So like keep going at it and see what else we can do. I like the focus into the youth, and through the schools maybe. And then the last one is, again, that equity lens. No matter how many rebates we offer, not everybody can afford to have and this is coming into the EV, but also some of the options. No matter how many rebates we offer, some people cannot afford to replace a water heater or a car, when it's electric. So what else can we do around that? So, and with that, thank you. It's amazing.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz, comments?
Really appreciate having this evening dedicated to this topic and feeling like we could really dig into the details. And thank you for being here and providing so much information to us. Corey, I really appreciate your comment about education, because so many times we think things can get solved through outreach and communication and education, and working with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority and trying to explain to people about defensible space around their homes, or why you need to remove a juniper. And it's the same thing. Like, do you not know what happens? No matter how much we do around education, it takes over and over and over again. And I really appreciate you thinking about all those different ways of how we're going to have to reach everyone in our community, and to make it easy and accessible and affordable, and visible. So making it really visible to people about what the impact is, I think is going to be part of the solution as we start bringing in that messaging of if we don't do it. And I have images of the movie WALL-E, if anyone, right? If we don't do things, and that was done 20 years ago, right? In that movie. So we really need to think beyond, and there's so much that's going to be involved. It's not one answer, not one solution. I think that the path we're on is great. I don't know, but I imagine we may be one of the few jurisdictions in Marin that has a Department of Sustainability. And it really shows our commitment to wanting to do this work and the fact that we need to do this work. So thank you. and I wish you had all the answers, but you're pretty close. So thank you for being here and really providing us this information.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Corey. Sorry. And sorry, thank you, Christine, for being here. I want to make sure I got your name right. This is just to take a huge step back. What are we talking about? Obviously, GHG inventory is the topic, but taking a step back, this is really about knowing what we know now and what are we going to do with it. We've been on this journey for some time. We've had many evidence-based publications for decades. I was inspired when I first was exposed to Earth in the Balance by Al Gore in 1993. It set my mind when I was a young person that this was a very important part of what we need to do to correct things that we maybe didn't know many decades ago. And we know it now, we know better. Our journey to reduce GHG, and I appreciated your rhetorical challenge. Imagine reducing 40% of anything. We all kind of chuckled, but it's actually, it's a big deal. And, you know, as we look incrementally year over year, the strategies that we're coming up with are meant to make certain that we're able to continue that well into the future. What we're talking about is what we're leaving behind for our posterity. That's so important. So I won't inventory all of the different pillars that we're talking about tonight, but I appreciate this report. I continue to look forward to receiving reports like this to understand what are we doing in the inbound, and in the vein of education, what are the upstream impacts that are what may seem like a very easy choice to say, well, I'm going to click on this and have it delivered, or I'm going to eat this food. Where did it come from? Was it an animal? What's the carbon footprint of it? These are questions that I think all of us should be aware of to make better choices, not just inbound, but overall end to end. Thank you.
Thank you. This is, and I know we still have another agenda item, but it really underscores the long-term commitment that San Rafael's had. I think we were the second jurisdiction in Marin County to have a climate change action plan. We were the first to win the Beacon Award for sustainability. So we have really taken the role of being leaders in this sector seriously for decades now. And we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for the folks that are in this room who've given comments either in person or online, and just all the work over the years. The city cannot do this alone. And I think we've heard that over and over and over. I was very sobered. Thank you, Christine O'Rourke, as always, for your great report. We're sobered. We're halfway there. And that deadline's getting closer. So we have a lot more to do. And I think we all celebrate what we've done today. But it's a little sobering about what the next steps are and what the challenges ahead to get that last remaining half. In terms of the priorities, we want to do it all right now. And I really want to commend both your team, I know Vice Mayor is part of the CCAP quarterly meeting, and all the community members, because prioritizing is hard because it means that some things have to wait 2 years to get to it. So there's a lot of work that was gone into those 11 elements. And I really want to underscore the integration. You had such a great comment of not just sprinkling it on the other initiatives in the other departments, but really baking it in. And I know that's something that we've talked about for a really long time. That's hard to do, but it also shows, again, the city's deep commitment, not just in this area, but throughout all of our departments. To me, that is just such a critical priority as we try to meet all these other objectives. So thank you to, again, the community. I do want to give a shout out to the youth who are already participating through the Marin School of Environmental Leadership, MCEL at Terra Linda High. They've been incredible. And the Vice Mayor is right that when they show up and start talking, we all pause and we really listen. So we'll continue to partner with them. So we will end all the comments here and the kudos. And I'm glad that we have a council that is supportive of the efforts that staff is doing as they continue to push the envelope. So with that, there is, it's 2 motions on this, and I will go to the Vice Mayor for the first one. How about that?
Thank you. I'll make a motion to accept the greenhouse gas inventory and reduction strategy annual report for 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Yaden Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Actually, I'm going to turn to the Vice Mayor for the second one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will make a motion to accept the 2023-2025 two-year work plan priorities report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hill,
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Yaden
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0. Thank you so much. And I know you're not going to leave because the next item, and you're not leaving here either in the room or people watching, we have the electric vehicle strategy, which is one of the priorities that we just accepted. So go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Welcome back. This is the electric vehicle acceleration strategy draft San Rafael work plan. We're going to start off with Christine again, and she'll give an overview of the countywide electric vehicle acceleration strategy and how it was developed and what went into it and why. And then I will go into our draft 2-year work plan and get your comments.
Okay, thank you. Yes, as Corey just said, this is a countywide EV acceleration strategy that we developed at the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership. We did this with funding from the Transportation Authority of Marin. And we started off with our goal, which was to support all of our climate action plans. All of them do have goals or targets set around ZEV adoption rates and in order to reduce transportation emissions. And so the intent was to develop a plan that could be accepted or adopted by all of the jurisdictions. And there is a work plan in our acceleration strategy that our jurisdictions can use in order to actually implement the plan. So we started this off by forming a subcommittee at MCP to guide the development of the plan. Corey was on that subcommittee, and we did quite a bit of outreach to different stakeholders, both at the state level with talking to different agencies. We spoke to nonprofits, EV advocates, and around in the area. And we also reviewed other agencies' plans. We looked at guidance from regional and state agencies. And then we developed some guiding principles to guide the development of the plan. And there are 8 of them. I'd like to just call out a couple. One is to provide equitable access to EV programs and strive for equitable outcomes. We've already talked a little bit about that. We wanted to be sure that we would track and measure the progress of these EV strategy actions. And then when it comes to funding and what kind of programs we wanted to prioritize, we realized that we really needed to focus the government actions on those that would most efficiently and effectively use public funds. There are a lot of regional, state, and federal funds and programs out there. We can capitalize and leverage those sources. We also need to just support the acceleration of EV sales and EV chargers by the private market so we can work in tandem with those other sources to reach our goals. So we already talked about the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for San Rafael County-wide. Over half of the transportation emissions come from the transportation sector. And it's, as we said, 2/3 of emissions here in San Rafael come from transportation. Of that transportation emissions, about 80% of them come from passenger vehicles. So it really is critical that we address passenger vehicles, which is mostly what this plan is about, especially, as our initial actions to reduce emissions. The chart on the left here is showing ZEV adoption rates and how it's been growing over time from 2010 to 2022. By the end of 2022, we had about 15,500 zero-emission vehicles on the road, and that was a 25% increase over 2021. So we continue to grow year over year. And countywide, we're at about 8% of all registered passenger vehicles were zero-emission vehicles. And when I talk about zero-emission vehicles, I'm talking about like all battery electric vehicles, as well as plug-in hybrid vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles, which make up a very small percent, just less than 1% of the ZEVs that are on the road in Marin County. So countywide, we're at 8%. San Rafael's a little lower at 6%. So 6% of all of the registered passenger vehicles in San Rafael are ZEVs. We are countywide double what the statewide average is, which is at just under 4%. So as I mentioned, the plan is to support the ZEV targets that have been adopted by all of the jurisdictions. They range from 25% to about 45%. The town of Fairfax is an outlier with 100% zero emissions vehicle goal. San Rafael is kind of at the lower end at 25%, but that was really because San Rafael's Climate Action Plan was one of the first ones that was updated. And I think since then, we've had such promising, as I was showing you before, adoption rates. And so some of the later jurisdictions have adopted more aggressive targets. So when we look at what we need to do in order to reach our targets, the chart on the left is showing you what we need to do to get to 35% ZEV adoption rate by 2030. And we really need to sustain a 21% annual growth rate to get to that 35%. We've been averaging about 22% over the past 3 years. So it certainly is doable if we just continue with the current growth rate. It does get harder to kind of sustain that growth rate as the numbers get larger, of course, but at least we're on the right path. The chart on the right is showing what the new sales targets needs to be in order to get to that growth rate of to the adoption rate of 35%. So the lighter color at the bottom of those two lines there is showing what the state is intending or what their targets are for ZEV sales. And then the one above that is for Marin sales in order to get to 35%. So essentially what I'm showing you here is that we need to do better than what the state is projecting. We need to do more than what the state is assuming is going to occur through this new regulation that requires all 100% of vehicle sales to be ZEVs by 2035. So the charging needs, there is a study that was done by this California Energy Commission. First, I'll just start with what we have. We have about 542 public chargers in Marin County, and we also have 484 shared private chargers in Marin. A shared private charger is something that's used at like a workplace or something that's at a multifamily building. They're essentially used by tenants or employees. So in San Rafael, about 56% of the housing units are single-family homes. I mention that because those can be kind of easier to install an EV charger because the homeowner has control and also may have a garage or at least access to where chargers could be installed. But in San Rafael, 44% of the housing units, people are living in apartments or condominiums, and those can be much more difficult to install EV chargers. So although we're doing pretty good, you can see here from 2021 to 2023, how many public and shared private chargers have been installed. I added that 2023 because the report actually shows it goes to 2021. So we haven't installed that many more public chargers, but we are installing more shared private chargers, which actually is good because that's where the greatest need is. And in order to reach that, as it says here, reach codes really are essential to make sure that at least all the new multifamily housing that's being built has enough charging equipment that's available to reach the EV targets. So TAM did a study about where we need EV chargers. This was done back in 2019. Level 2 chargers are chargers that can charge a battery in usually about 8 to 10 hours. And so where we need to have those types of chargers are really where cars stay for a pretty long time. So this could be shopping centers, school parking lots, anywhere where people are keeping their car while they're getting to work. So smart stations, ferry terminals, park and ride lots. So also a need to ensure that we have enough chargers in neighborhoods like the Canal, as also Marin City, in order to support equitable access and adoption for EVs. And then for level 3 chargers, there's really a need for those to be in major transportation corridors like Highway 101, anywhere that it's easy to pull off of the highway and get a quick charge. And then also on other major corridors as well, like Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, Highway 101, and Highway 1. In the EV strategy, we do an overview of how many EVs, and these are all battery electric vehicles that our cities and towns already have. One of the things that we found is that passenger vehicles are they're of course the easiest to find electric versions of, but our cities and towns just don't have a lot of passenger cars in their vehicle fleets. That's because the fleets are generally made up of public works trucks, heavy duty, medium duty vehicles, also fire trucks, which are heavy duty vehicles as well, and special purpose vehicles and police fleets. So those can be just difficult to electrify or have EV options because they are special purpose and special utility vehicles. The city of San Rafael has 1 passenger car, 3 parking service buggies, 2 pickup trucks, and a utility bike, and 4 e-bikes. So actually, San Rafael is doing pretty good, especially when you compare it to the other jurisdictions. So the plan looks at barriers to EV adoption, and we identify strategies really that are geared to meeting these barriers. The barriers are around vehicle technology, charging, the economics, perceptions, and behavior. And we also look at e-bikes and e-scooters. Some of these are kind of being worked out, like EV range, lack of vehicle availability. The market is really, improving EV range, having a lot more vehicles available. As far as charging, of course, we still have a great need for more chargers. We certainly need them near multifamily buildings, and the reliability of public chargers has also been an issue. There's a lot of chargers out there that are broken, or they're just not being maintained. Around perceptions and behavior, there still is a lot of misinformation about EVs out there, just general resistance to purchasing an EV or substituting a car with an EV. So we need to, improve education around EVs. So the EV strategy has 36 actions in 4 areas. The expectation here is that a jurisdiction will go through those and identify the actions that are really relevant to the jurisdiction. Not all will apply to all jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions have already implemented some of them. So we provide all of them as kind of a pick and choose. And then we provide the sample work plan in the appendix so that a jurisdiction can then kind of build out the plan, identify who's going to be responsible for implementing it, how much it would cost, and then when that action will be implemented. So I think I'll now turn it over to Corey.
Thank you, Christine. Okay, so we took the work plan and identified several things that we decided we thought would be good for our priority work plan here. So in the San Rafael draft work plan, as you notice, we had 20 actions listed. We decided to focus on the near term only instead of looking out 3 to 5, 7 years. This is a rapidly changing technology and area, and it made more sense to really hone in on, to us anyway, at the staff level, what are we going to do in the next couple of years? What are we really going to focus our energy on? And we can revisit in a couple of years and see, are some of those things in the strategy still relevant for the 3 to 5 year work plan area, or would there be other opportunities that are more important at that point? 9 of the things in those 20 actions are current practice, and there are 11 new actions as well. They were all identified through work with the new employee green team, which has been fantastic and very much at the table with meeting with Public Works and also getting input from Sustainable San Rafael. A lot of the rationale for the choice making had to do with the fact that the mayor mentioned with the last thing is that if you try to make everything a priority, nothing's a priority. We can't do everything at once. We have resource constraints. So what are some of the things that are most important? We utilize the guiding principles that Christine mentioned, which align a lot with the San Rafael guiding principles with our overarching equity goals. Also, we wanted to prioritize getting our own house in order. We have a fleet management plan that needs to be updated, and we really need to kind of accelerate our own EV adoption rate. And then where can the city really make an impact versus the private market? So much of it is driven by the private market. So in what areas do we support that? And in what areas do we kind of get out of the way? We're also always looking for co-benefits, right? So Again, the fleet policy needs to be updated. So that's something that needs to be done. And it also needs to prioritize EVs. So we're, feeding two birds with one seed there. And so that's sort of how we decided on this draft work plan. And then we reviewed with our sustainability liaison as well. And then just a note on the cost of implementation. Most of the items were really staff time. That was the cost. As we implement, anything will go through the normal budget process. So I'll start with our current practices. We do collaborate with other jurisdictions and nonprofits with EV ride and drive campaigns and things like that. We'll continue to do that. We currently promote EV rebates. So when MCE comes out with new things or whatever, we definitely promote those types of things. And we are currently involved in a couple of projects that are looking at equity and disadvantaged communities and how do we increase charger capacity and access to electric vehicles there. There's this EV ownership workshop that, Ride and Drive Clean is one of our key partners. They do fantastic work. And on September 11th, they're doing, a very necessary, what do you do as a new EV owner? I mean, my wife just figured out how to do fast charging as we go long distances. That's a skill set. It's not easy. Sometimes you show up, how do we find them, first of all? And how do we know that it's actually in service and those types of things? Some of the things we've already done, one is the green building reach codes, which we've talked about before, which is really making sure that there's a significant amount of spaces in multifamily housing that's EV ready. That's the conduit, the post, the plug. So it's really easy to install a charger. If it's just EV capable, which was the past baseline, it's just conduit in the ground. And now it's a lot of work and pretty expensive. So there's a lot of barriers to actually installing the charger. And then we have a base amount as well that have EV chargers installed. That would be actually a really good selling point for people that want to rent in the apartment complexes. And then as mentioned in the chart, we have some e-bikes in the city fleet and the police department as well. Public charging, some of the new action items, update our capital improvement plans. And so that's something that we've been working on for some years now is making them more robust and usable. And so that's very exciting. We're going to be including EV chargers in those considerations as well. A lot of it has to do with the infrastructure, right? It's not just the vehicles anymore. And then including EV charging installations and plans for new public facilities and for upgrades. I know Jim Myers does that for all his parking garages when he does an upgrade. And then prioritize investment in chargers to those facilities that are especially near multifamily housing that are frequently used, again, to be able to provide charging for people that don't have as much access. This idea of ensuring equitable access to public EV charging infrastructure in underserved communities. This is one mistake in the chart in that we put as a low staff time. This is the one area that's more of a medium staff time piece. It has been low, but we anticipate more staff time as time goes on. And then coordinating with public utilities to prepare the grid and for bidirectional charging. So an example of this is the undergrounding for the canal neighborhood of all the electricity. We want to make sure that the load and capacity is there as well. So we're not precluding. Once those go underground, it's really hard to increase the load, right? So we're going to be working with PG&E on that and encouraging large employers and multi-family property owners to increase their EV charging. And then the idea of partnering with EV charging vendors. Right now, the only Tesla's they have the fast chargers at San Rafael Whole Foods, but really don't have fast chargers in San Rafael beyond that. We really need to identify some. That's a real good economic development opportunity. People come in for a half hour to an hour and charge, and they need amenities. And then in terms of getting our own house in order, like I said, developing this fleet replacement plan that prioritizes zero emission vehicles, includes charging infrastructure in the plan, looks at life cycle costs and efficiency. Do we have the right number of vehicles? Are they being utilized appropriately? We don't want to actually necessarily change a gas vehicle that's not being used much because we're increasing emissions to some degree with the embedded emissions in a new vehicle. So, but if vehicles are traveled a lot, so when we get to public safety and public works, that's when we start to see a real difference because people are driving a lot. And then we want to consider revisions in our procurement policies. Right now, we rely on the state contract for a lot, but those 2 trucks that we have in there, we actually still haven't received. They've been on order for over a year. And so we lose out because a big city can buy a lot of them and we only can buy 1 or 2 at a time. And so who's going to get the order? And so we need to be looking at other procurement policies, including leasing options, and then the fire and police conversion, as we mentioned, and then this idea of just promoting what we do. That's not something that's embedded in my work plan. Often I don't do such a great job at that. So just doing more of that promotion. So that's a high level overview. I know that you got the plan in your packet and everything as well, but it's a good time to just see if you have any questions, see if our priorities align with what you expect, see if there's anything critical that you think is missing, and any other feedback for implementation purposes as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Corey. We'll see if there are any questions. Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say this more fantastic. It's amazing. I have this kind of like crazy question. In Europe, I'm used to like is with big cities where they don't allow anymore cars that they are older than X. Do you see anything like that happening in the Bay Area? And I guess I know it's kind of like maybe like a big question, but also the equity component, because in order to do that, you have to have like a really good transportation plan. And that, by the way, the month of September, I can tell you in Madrid, train is free for everybody. So like, do you ever see anything like that? Because I think one thing is what we can promote and rebates. The other one is what the state can dictate and at the federal government. And the other one is like, can cities and Bay Areas impose changes like that where you have no choice if you want to use a car?
Yeah, and there are definitely equity components to that, right? Or considerations. I know Bay Area Air Quality Management District used to have a cash for clunkers program, and buy those old vehicles to get those smog monsters off the street, and that ended. And several years ago, I was talking with somebody on staff there about the idea when it was going away, about offering funding to be able to get some of the hybrids where people are moving into EVs and get those hybrids in the hands of people that are low income potentially, or that don't have access to a cleaner air vehicle and have old clunkers, some kind of program that could start to recycle some of these vehicles. And I guess there were a lot of complications with that. So I haven't really delved into it. I think it's really not a local government thing. It's more of like a Bay Area air quality management thing at least, or state level.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Everything is very clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill, questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Corey and Christine, again. I just noticed that the template includes a column around funding source, and it's not in our work plan. Can you comment why it's not there? I know we had this conversation. I just want to make sure the public can hear it.
Yeah. So when we looked at it, it said staff time so many times. There were very few entries that had anything different, and what they basically were in something like the fleet policy. It was not only staff time, but it would be then utilizing grants to offset any increased costs, looking at life cycle costs. Some things were going to be part of our CIP, so it would be part of the general fund, but it's all part of a project upgrade anyway. But for the most part, it was staff time, so we ended up leaving that column off because it just was redundant.
Makes sense. The answer is staff time. And then I think you may have covered this. OE2 didn't have a staff time value, and can you just?
Oh yes, yeah, that should be low priority.
Low priority, okay.
Or low staff time. Sorry, that should be very, very minimal staff time.
Got it. So make sure I'm reading my questions here. You did mention, of course, we did have 4 e-bikes in our inventory. I'm glad we have that, and it seemed to me that it aligned to MF7, and I know that's not among them. It feels like by definition we have already in progress that we have incorporated e-bikes. So I don't know, is there a way to consider that MF7 is technically in progress?
Yeah, so what I was trying to capture here were things that we wanted to continue to do ongoing, or we wanted to expand in some way. But we did kind of run up against that a few times. Like, well, do we include this? And it's really challenging to make sure that it's clear and actionable, and it's not too overcrowded as well. So that one, we've talked about it at the City Green Team for several years now. We don't really see beyond the real functional purpose in the police department to use that to be on the streets closer to the ground and be able to, for other than that, we don't really see a use for e-bikes. Most of the time that we're using a vehicle, we need to go someplace. We can either, if we go to B Street, we're going to walk down there. But other than that, it's often to cart stuff and to do or somebody's going to all these building inspections and they're going. So the e-bike, we've never really found a use case. So there's the idea of, it sounds really great, but if nobody's going to use them, then we're just buying more stuff.
I appreciate that. And so you didn't say it this way, but I'm also taking in that technically we did it, but the impact is really not paying off.
Well, the impact is paying off for the police department, that's for sure. But beyond that, I don't see any expansion of it. So that's why I left it off.
I think that matters. Yeah. But I appreciate that. And then finally, when we think about, there were 36 potential things we could have put in there, and then 20 were selected. My sense, and I think it came through in your testimony earlier, but it was really around feasibility, impact, staff time availability. I mean, these things are always the things that we have to consider around what's above the line and what's below the line. And I think just to maybe just check in with you that I'm understanding this right, this really is about what is accomplishable within this 2-year time frame that we can do. And by the way, and you didn't say this exactly, but inside of the sustainability umbrella, there are so many different things. So I appreciate that what I'm hearing too is that, in addition to your time and what's available, you have to make sure that you're making really clear choices, options around what we can do. So maybe there's no question in there, but I'm just maybe affirming, am I getting it right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And if we didn't have a robust green team that's really putting real time into this, some of these things probably wouldn't have made it on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz.
Thank you. Couple questions. So majority of the new items that have come on the list are under the public charging, and that's under the status of new. So assuming the work plan's adopted, then what does the status change to?
Yeah, they would probably, most of them go to ongoing. I'm trying to think about them. There may be some that actually get completed, but most will be ongoing, and some will probably be ongoing way beyond the 2 years for sure, especially the ensuring equitable access is going to be a long-term goal. So I could see that going over the whole lifespan of what was in the countywide strategy for sure.
So I think maybe there's an opportunity to think about the status of these items a little bit differently.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I didn't bring that up earlier because I was looking at it, but I do appreciate you changing. I think maybe I'm being very not quite on the staff time. All of these being low. I think it's very optimistic. And I'm glad you updated that one. I appreciate it. I love the idea. I think it's very optimistic. So we can look at that. Another question on the do we have any relationships with current dealerships? And I don't know if that's a public-private concern, like mixing that. But in terms of our dealerships, are they aware of all the incentives and messaging that we're trying to do? So, because I think probably, well, maybe some people will actually do the research ahead of time, but some people will just go directly to the dealership. And I'm wondering if those dealerships are as aware as we are of some of the options that are available in terms of rebates and discounts.
Well, that's good. And I'll try to answer both questions at once, or at least address your earlier concern. I have been accused of being overly optimistic in the past for sure. Some of those items, the reason why they're low staff time, because what we're really doing is just supporting what others are doing that are doing it better than us. So Ride and Drive Clean is the one that they've been talking to, the online app folks, and including training for their staff to be able to, when people are calling and using their app to get a new vehicle, making sure that EVs are being shown as well, and that they can answer questions around EVs, because that was not. So they're doing that kind of transformation. We're just supporting them. So I don't really know about our local dealerships, but I know that's something that Ride and Drive Clean is really clearly thinking about and working on and doing. So that's why it's a lower staff time, because we're not going to go out and do that probably. That's not something that I'm anticipating we're going to spend a lot. But what we're going to do is try to work with Ride and Drive Clean and support their efforts as much as possible. So that's why a lot of those end up being low priority or low staff time commitments.
Fair. I appreciate that. It might be interesting in terms of partnership with the chamber, of those for San Rafael dealerships, just to share the information and have it packaged for them so they understand the priority for that it's for us. And another question, are you aware of any rental programs? Again, it's not really a city driven thing, and maybe it's to Christine, of any rental programs for people to try it out. I know there's a number of fairs that people can take a look, but actually rentals.
I'm not, are you?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
I like that though. Yeah, the ride and drive clean events are, the opportunity for you to get in a vehicle and drive it around. That's for sure. I did that myself, but yeah, I don't know of any rental programs.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Hill, another question.
So I'm going to introduce a question I did not send prior, which is in the media, we're seeing a lot of action going on in the city and county of San Francisco around autonomous vehicles. And this is not really a fair question, but can you imagine a future where the city of San Rafael would have autonomous vehicles as a way for every community member to have access to an electric vehicle that is not owned or leased?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of exciting work around that. One of the things that we have envisioned and talked about once was, well, if we have parking impacts in the canal, but we've got parking garages downtown, could we have autonomous shuttles where people could park for free in a secure lot downtown and get a shuttle home and not have to walk a mile, to get home, or are there other opportunities? So I think there's a lot of innovation and creativity that's going to be sparked in that area. I don't know that I can envision it personally, what that looks like, but I can envision it's going to be very different and that there will be opportunities there for sure.
Yeah. And I don't want the question to be interpreted that we should do this tomorrow.
Right.
I think that we're watching it happen live right now, and there are many consequences to early adoption. So thanks for accepting the question.
Thank you. And I just have a quick question for Christine. In the data that you showed on sales, does it include vehicles that are being leased? Because you would get that at the registration, right? So and you had two different graphs. So there's both purchase is one number, but registration, you'd be capturing those numbers of leased vehicles.
So if it's registered, we're definitely capturing the leased vehicles.
Okay.
So for the sales, that's a really good question. I imagine that it is counted as a sale, is what I would imagine, but I'll check into that.
As an owner of a leased EV. So I'm like, is that being captured? I think there are several people.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Okay.
We'll look into that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's open this up to public comment. We'll start with the folks in the room. Okay, I'll jump in front of Bill. Okay, come on down.
As far as a source of cars for a variety of purposes, I wonder if it's possible to look at things like the police impound yard where cars have been taken for whatever purpose, and sometimes they're resold, and there's probably a number of EVs or hybrids in there. And if the city could take those and give them to the people that they want to use rather than the gas-powered cars. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that idea. Mr. Carney.
Good evening again. So accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles is central to meeting the greenhouse gas goals that we were talking about earlier. In order to replace the gas cars and trucks that are, over 60% of our remaining greenhouse gas emissions, with the reduction of at least another, according to the staff report, 78,000 tons of greenhouse gases needed to reach our 2030 goal. We applaud the city for incorporating much of the countywide EV strategy in the proposed strategy before you tonight. Of the actions recommended, we would emphasize the primary importance of education, urging people to switch to EVs for a fun, economical ride to anywhere people want to go, except to the gas pump, which is becoming obsolete. So that's my brand of marketing. But EV marketing campaigns in conjunction with other towns and cities are needed to build wide momentum for EV adoption. That is one of the strategies before you. TAM has developed the marketing materials, but now towns need to work with TAM to roll out the actual campaigns. Also, highly effective ride and drive events and similar targeted outreach should be a regular part of introducing EVs to San Rafael residents in a hands-on manner. And TAM is offering, I understand, towns the funds, or at least part of the funds for such events. This summer has shown us that the planet is rapidly overheating, resulting in all the things we've heard about. It's shown us what scientists have been telling us: we've got to cut our fossil fuel emissions in half this decade, and then net zero emissions by 2045. So EVs are the fastest way to reach that necessarily near-term future. Thank you for putting San Rafael on that road forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Val. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Miles Smith, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Board of Sustainable San Rafael. But thank you all for your leadership. Thank you for all your research and information. I'm honored to be a San Rafael citizen and see you all take these topics on. I'm just very pleased. So thank you. In addition to some of what Bill just shared and promoting the adoption of EVs by the public, I want to highlight a few other key actions in the strategy before you this evening. First one is 100% zero emissions public fleet, which can serve as a model for residents to move to EVs. We recommend that it be backed by a fleet replacement plan implemented by a dedicated fleet manager. This has been talked about a lot, but we want to really call out the increased public EV charging infrastructure, tapping all available funding sources and included in the city's capital improvement budget. We want to strongly support EVs in underserved communities, including charging infrastructure for multi-unit developments and large employers. And just to expand the importance of providing access to EVs to our entire community, we really see access to EVs being an economic issue, an environmental issue, an equity issue, and a health issue. So for all those reasons, we see it super important to have all of the San Rafael community be able to access EVs. And we, of course, have heard some of the challenges, but we believe strongly that we will fight for that. With that, thank you for leading the way to a cleaner and more climate responsible transportation in Marin.
Thank you, Miles. Anyone else in the chambers? Not seeing anyone. Is there anyone online who'd like to comment on our EV strategy?
I do see one hand raised.
Hello again, this is Kate Powers. I sit on the Citizens Oversight Committee of TAM, and many environmental advocates have been advocating for the use of the alternative fuel vehicle program to be well funded by TAM. And my experience on that committee is that if rebates are not refunded, expenditures are not applied for, or TAM is not aware of the intention of cities to apply for those grants, that budget item is reduced. So I would highly encourage the city in your fleet conversion plan to really look at opportunities to use TAM's funding through the vehicle registration program. The other ask that I have of the city for our city council members who sit on committees and represent San Rafael. TAM is one of those committees, but there are other committees that you're doing a good job in San Rafael, and you have the ability as a policymaker and voting on policies throughout the county to help the county further its greenhouse gas emissions, decreasing those. And especially with TAM, Measure AA, when it was adopted, was expected to get 27 million. Now it's up to 35 million. We'd like to encourage TAM to use some of that to reduce the obstacles to EV adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hi there, it's Victoria Holdridge again. Just wanted to thank you for your work on getting EVs more spread out around Marin, and I would like for you to keep your focus on the equity issue, and in particular, people like me who are in multifamily condo developments that don't have the infrastructure for plug-in vehicles, and as well as heat pump furnace. I would like to convert to a heat pump furnace, but it's complicated in a condo complex. So anyway, keep us all in mind, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Victoria.
I see no other hands raised. I'll give everyone a moment. I see no further public comment.
Thank you. I will close the public comment and come back to the council for additional comments. I heard just comments and input. I didn't hear any direct questions from the community, and I will start with the Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you again. A lot of hard work, great information, and I know that you are keeping our entire community in mind when we are doing this plan, and it's extremely difficult because it's not just something that everybody can do. So how we can go about it, making sure that we are not leaving anybody behind us, is extremely important, and I think this plan accomplishes that. So I love the last comment about TAM having some funding maybe for this. I'm like, interesting. So thank you again. Thank you for all the community members that they are here tonight, and for everybody that is supporting this. It is crucial for all of us, for our city, but it doesn't really have the environment doesn't really have a border. So this impacts San Rafael, impacts the entire county, impacts all of us. So thank you for your work. And I sit as a board of directors for MC, and a reminder that until September, at the end of September, try not to use the grid between 4 and 9 p.m. So I'll finish with that.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. How about Councilmember Kurtz? Additional comments?
No, just appreciate the report and the work that's already been done and will continue to be done. I think this plan makes a ton of sense. I think it's ambitious. But I do appreciate the fact that there's so many partners in our community who are also working on the same path forward. So this is a hill we're all going to need to climb together. So I think there's a great opportunity with that, much easier than some of the other things we've tried to do. So in one sense, because at least there's good understanding in our community of the work that has to happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
Thank you for this second report this evening. The why is very important to iterate. It's been said several times accurately that our GHG, the majority of our GHG comes from transportation. And of that, 80% comes from people's personal vehicles. EV, I think, stands out as one of the main priorities we go after, which is why we're investing so much in our EV strategy. So I appreciate Corey, your team, Christine, for making certain that we are selecting the right part of work plan for the next 2 years. It's thoughtful. It's the right thing to do. I've heard the word equity said many times, and I think just leaning into that for a moment, there are so many folks in our community who could be left behind on this. So I appreciate making certain that we're not just saying it, but that we're doing, taking actions that lead towards an outcome, which is essentially the definition of policy. So I look forward to making certain we can have measurable outcomes. I don't know. I don't think that the horizon of 2 years is necessarily something where we're going to see something that's appreciable, but I do want to make sure that we're capturing, even if they're small data points, what are the things beyond just, hey, we have an EV purchased in parts of our community that don't traditionally have EVs. That's good, but I want to see maybe if there are other ways that we can measure progress there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just close by thanking the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership that did that entire plan from which we could do kind of the menu option. And this item tonight was both to share with the community, with the council, the priorities that had been selected through the work with the Employee Green Team. Sustainable San Rafael, I know, has been really involved. And I think what you're hearing from all of us here on the dais, that we concur with what you presented to us. We don't want to have you have any changes. I think there's some concern about how big the bite of the apple is, but we also know that you'll keep us updated as we go forward. It is in alignment with our other CCAP goals, as well as our other goals and objectives, kind of going what Councilmember Hill was talking about in terms of metrics and how do we know that we're moving the needle. So I guess Godspeed on all this, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the bigger framework and this very specific aspect this evening. So, and thank you to the community, as always, both Sustainable San Rafael, I know I gave you a shout out, give you another. Really having that deep partnership is what enables us to have the priorities that we know we can achieve, that we can actually make a difference on. Couldn't do this alone, so thank you. Let's have a motion. How about it, Vice Mayor?
I'm so excited. So I'll have a motion to accept the report and provide feedback on the City of San Rafael's electric vehicle acceleration strategy draft work plan.
A second. Moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Hill.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Yadin-Scolati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. We don't have any items on the San Rafael successor agency, so this meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.